There was a video that went viral about 2 weeks ago of Swag Kage ranking every single fight in the Big Three. Now, I saw all over social media people blasting him, not agreeing with him, and obviously when talking about the Big Three, it's going to be nothing but arguments. Well, in today's video, I'm going to be doing that exact same thing. I do think my take on the fights are a little bit better, but I mean, I don't know, it's opinion versus opinion, so who can really say? But what I want to know is, what is your guys' favorite fight from the Big Three, and which is your favorite from the Big Three? I only have two real disclaimers / rules that I have to say. The first being that each fight is ranked in order. So like, the way I'm going to do it is we're going to go through the tiers. We're going to go through F, D, C, B, A, all of that, right? And in the tiers itself, they're going to be ranked as well. Not only that, but I have a disclaimer when it comes to the Bleach fights. Now, I have not seen all of Bleach yet. I am at the end of Fake Karakura Town, so there are a lot of the fights that I can't really give an opinion on, which I know sucks for Bleach because a lot of the best fights do come from Thousand Year Blood War. So I do apologize. Maybe once I finish that, we will do this again. However, I'm going off most of the original Bleach fights since I have seen most of the original Bleach. I will show you guys the fights that will be missing. So these are the fights that will not be included in our tier list because I just don't have enough information on them. So let's get started with our F tier fights, our really bad fights. Now, I'm going to rapid fire a few fights here because these ones are just forgettable. I literally do not remember them. And I know some people may be saying, oh, just because you don't remember it doesn't make it an F tier fight. I disagree. If I cannot remember the fight, then it clearly was not good. If it's not even memorable enough to be mentioned, it clearly was not a good fight. So I'm going to rapid fire those off and just show you what they are. We have Yamato versus Ryukugyu, don't remember that. Sanji versus Doflamingo, Straw Hats versus Giola, Usopp and Chopper versus Dosun and Daruma, Frankie versus Ikaros Much and Dosun. I believe those last two are both from Fishman Island, but don't remember them at all. Zoro versus T-Bone, Frankie versus Nero, Sanji versus Wands, Sanji versus Jerry, Soifon versus Gio Vega, Sanji versus Full Body, Zoro versus Kabaji, Luffy versus Moji and Richie, Sanji versus Pearl, Chopper versus Chess Marimo, Zoro versus Butchie and Siam, Luffy versus Crocodile's second fight. Now, I will say, I don't understand this one because, or I shouldn't say I don't remember this one, I just have it combined with the third fight because they happen right next to each other. Uryu and Chad versus Ice Ringer and Demora, Robin versus Yama, Toshiro Urahara and assistant captains versus Luffy and Yami, Rangiku versus Nakim Gradina, not sure, Rukia versus D-Roy, Uryu and Rukin versus Menos Grande, Rangiku versus Kira, Shinsui and Ukitake versus Yamamoto, Kai and Rukia and Ukitake versus Metastasia, Jinbei versus Opera, Shikamaru versus Kin, Kakashi versus Kabuto, Ichigo and Don Kanonji versus Demi Hollow, Chad versus Bulbous G, Orihime versus Numb Chandelier. Those are all the fights I don't remember. Now, I know a lot of you may be saying, maybe thinking like, oh, I didn't watch the shows or whatever, this and that. I've been watching Bleach for the past year, so if I don't remember the Bleach one, it should be fresh on my mind, so can't blame me on that. I've watched Naruto about 8 times in its entirety, so if I don't remember a Naruto fight, it's got to be really bad. Now, One Piece, I will say I have only seen once, but it is in my top 5 shows, so I should be able to remember it. The One Piece one, you can cut me a little bit of slack or hate on me a little bit for that because I have only seen it once, so, maybe I am just forgetting. But the other two are fresh on the mind, so if I'm forgetting them, then they're just not that good. But now we move on to the worst fight in the Big Three, and in my opinion, this is the worst fight in all of anime. I should have mentioned it first because it is genuinely the worst fight I've ever seen in anything, and that is Renji and Uryu versus I don't know how to say his name, the pink-haired guy, Cezale Poro Grons, I don't remember how to say his name, no clue. Genuinely the worst fight in all of anime I have ever seen. The only redeeming part of this fight, and the only reason I did not drop the show right here, was because Pesce was there. If Pesce was not in this would have made me drop Bleach. It is so bad. It is the worst fight I've ever seen in my entire life. There is not a single good thing about it other than Pesce is there. Not a likable moment, not a likable character, nothing likable about this fight at all. And so to follow that up, we have pretty obviously the pink-haired guy versus Kurotsuchi, or Kuro, whatever they call him, the captain, the science captain. I'm not a big fan of the science captain as is. And then you put him up against the guy who just got done having the worst fight in anime history. Yeah, it just isn't going to succeed. You could have put Ichigo up against him and the fight still would have sucked because that dude is so freaking boring. So I don't even really blame Captain Korra. Well, I don't know why I'm calling him that, but I don't really blame the captain. I more blame the pink-haired guy. The other one I do blame on Uryu because Uryu sucks, but that's besides the point. We'll move on to our next fight in F tier, which is Shanks versus Kid. Now, you know, I gotta rep. I've got the Kid tattoo here. If you're wondering why my sleeve is like this, just got a new tattoo that's healing, so I don't want it rubbing, but yeah, I have a Kid tattoo, and I just got to put it F tier because I don't know why Kid went easy on him, you know what I'm saying? I know he let Shanks win so Luffy wouldn't feel bad. I know that's what happened, right? But I'm just going to have to put it F tier because Kid really should have tried in the fight. I don't know why he let Shanks beat him, you know? I'm not really understanding. But anyway, we'll move on to the actual worst fight of One Piece, which is Luffy versus Foxy. Now, this was made canon later on. This used to not be a canon arc, if I'm not mistaken, and it was later made canon. I hate Foxy. This is the worst arc in One Piece now that it is officially canon. The Long Ring, whatever island, that arc is absolutely terrible. Foxy is so annoying. The only good thing that came from this is boxing Luffy, which was pretty funny, but Foxy just sucks so much. It was terrible. Next, we have Kamakiri versus Eneru. Now, this is one of those fights, and you'll see a lot of these rank low where it's like really one-sided. And now, it's a character that we don't really care about getting beat in a one-sided feud, which makes it even worse. Like, this is just fodder versus, like, the strongest guy at this point in the show. It's like, come on, dude. I don't want to say it's, like, lazy. Like, these things are important, but I honestly don't think this should have been included in the list, in my opinion, because I'm sure there's scenes of Eneru fucking up other people, and it's the same damn thing. So, yeah, it's one of these that, like, I probably just wouldn't have included on the list. Then we have my least favorite fight from Naruto, which is Team Guy versus Team Guy. This was just annoying to watch, I'm not gonna lie. Not very entertaining at all, because it's just a mirror match, and mirror matches just aren't really that enjoyable, in my opinion. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they do end up switching who they were fighting, but yeah, the mirror match stuff is just not very entertaining. Next up, we have Uryu versus Kurotsuchi again. Now, this is not Kuro's fault again. I am blaming it on Uryu. If you guys have not seen my video, which, you know, you don't really need to, but all I will say is Uryu is my least favorite character in all of anime. I absolutely hate Uryu. And so, obviously, most Uryu fights I'm going to absolutely hate because I just don't like him. I do think he is the worst character in any anime that I have seen. I really don't like him, so, you know, that's why I ranked this low. And if you thought it was done, get ready for the 3P, because then we have Uryu and Orihime versus Jirobo. I don't like Orihime either, so this is, again, two characters I don't like versus a no-name I don't really care about, so it's pretty obvious how this ended up this low. Not a big fan. Next up, we have Uryu versus Saruchi or whatever. The best part about this fight was, again, Pesce was there. I honestly think if they didn't bring Uryu to Hueco Mundo, that would be the best arc in Bleach. All the worst parts of Hueco Mundo are because of Uryu, including this fight. It is absolutely terrible. The best part is Pesce shooting stuff out of his cock. Other than that, this fight sucks. Next up, though, this one might surprise a lot of people. We have Luffy versus Sanji. At this point in time, I really did not like Sanji anymore. I used to love Sanji for the most part, and then once it got to Whole Cake, I did not like Sanji anymore. I know a lot of people stopped liking him because of the Fishman stuff, but my reason for disliking him was because he went through all the stuff with Robin and then did the same thing Robin did. You think fighting Big Mom is scarier than fighting the entire government? Like, I don't understand his logic behind that one. And then when Luffy gets there to save him, he could have just tried to ignore him, run away, all this, and that. No, he then goes to fight Luffy, and it's like, I just don't get it. I don't get Sanji. His logic here makes no sense whatsoever. He's not being reasonable at all. He could have just told Luffy what happened, and because look, Luffy came anyway. They would have charged the place anyway. It's like he spent how many like years and months with this captain to not know anything about him. Stupid. I honestly think this decision was dumb, and that's why I hated Sanji at this point. And so I really didn't like this fight because I thought Sanji was just being an idiot. Next up, we have Yumi Chika versus Charlotte. Now, I remember I played Anime Last Stand back in the day, if you know, you know. And I remember a lot of people hyping up the pretty Arrancar or whatever they called him, right? And even my friends that I watched, like, oh, it's so funny, it's such a good fight or whatever, the dude's awesome. The dude fucking sucks, okay? There's nothing interesting about him, I'm not gonna lie. The fight was really boring. I liked the other guy, the Yumi Chika, or however you say his name. I liked him. I think he's pretty cool. But the Charlotte guy was a massive disappointment. I think the real reason reason it's an F is because it was hyped up. If it wasn't hyped up, this would probably be like a C tier fight, but it was hyped up so much for me, and then I get to it and it's like, this is like one of the worst fights in Bleach, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't really understand the hype behind that one. That fight sucked. Next up, we have Zoro versus Yukimaru and the rematch. I'm just going to lump them together because I don't really understand. I don't remember this fight all too well, but I also don't really understand how this ever got a rematch. Like, I feel like Zoro should have won this pretty easily. Not a big fan of this fight at all. Next up, though, we have Asuma, reincarnated, I should say, or reanimated, I should say, versus Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji. This one is down here purely because he did not need to be reanimated. Like, we already had all the Asuma stuff settled. We didn't need to see Asuma come back, I'm not going to lie. So, to me, that's why I have it in F tier. I just did not want to see him come back. Then we have Luffy versus Alvida. I'm just not a big fan of Alvida at all. I didn't really think she's a great introductory villain, unlike Buggy. Like, I do think Buggy is a great character to have in the start. Alvida, I thought, was pretty pointless. I feel like she serves no purpose to the story at all. And then we have Mashiro and Kensei versus Wonder Wise. Now, I do think Wonder Wise is pretty funny, so that is why it's a little bit more towards the top. However, this fight was just incredibly boring. I'll be honest, it is just a really boring fight. Although Wonder Wise is a funny character, the fight was pretty boring. This should be no surprise to be an F tier. We have Luffy versus Hody Jones. Now, this is going to spoil a later ranking of a fight that we have on here, but this should have ended with Zoro versus Hody. Zoro dog-walked Hody Jones in this arc, yet it still got drug out for so long just for Luffy to fight him and then dog-walk him again. I just don't really understand why this fight even had to happen, and this is a problem that I kind of have in One Piece where everything has to be about Luffy. I get Luffy's the main character, but when you have over 300 episodes at this point, or over 1,200 episodes, you would think some of the side characters would have a little bit of shine, and this should have been that moment. Zoro should have won this for them because he dominated Hody in Hody's home territory. It should have been over. This had no reason to go on this long, and that's why I have it in F tier, because this fight was meaningless. It should have never happened. Then we have Sasuke versus Oboro. I mean, this is just Sasuke versus a bum, let's be honest. That's why it's an F tier. Then we have Kankuro versus Mesami. Again, this is Kankuro versus a bum, let's be honest. I told you a lot of those are going to be pretty low, because when it's super strong guy versus bum, it's just not that interesting in my opinion. I get it is necessary, but like these two, not really necessary. Then we have Anko versus Orochimaru. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think anybody really likes Anko, and it was a good introduction for Orochimaru, but if we're talking about the actual fight here, again, this is Orochimaru just dog-walking Anko. What can Anko do to Orochimaru? Not a damn thing, so that's where it was like, you know, the fight really wasn't that good. Also, the fight is incredibly short, if I'm not mistaken. In our second to last in the F tier before we move on to D, we have Sanji versus Page One. Again, two characters I really don't like. I really don't like Page One at all, and Sanji, again, at this point, I really didn't like. Now, Sanji, the more and more it goes on, I am starting to like him more and more again. I do still think, other than Jinbei, he is the worst member in the crew, but he is starting to grow on me again. But yeah, at this point, I still didn't really like him, and I really don't like Page One, so it's pretty clear why this made F. Then lastly, in our F tier, we have Captains versus the Espada in the initial clash. Just super underwhelming, to be honest. Nothing really interesting happened here. And then they all broke up into their individual fights, and that's where things really got interesting. So the initial clash, kind of boring, not gonna lie, kind of anticlimactic. Almost feels like, again, another thing that probably shouldn't be included on here, because the whole point of the initial clash was to break off into the separate clashes. So it feels like this was a little bit pointless to have on the list, but it's on the list, so I ranked it. Now we can move on to our D tier. These are fights that I would generally consider bad, but they're not the worst fights you'll ever see, right? Like, you can definitely watch these fights and still get some enjoyment. They're just not great. So starting off on our first, at the very bottom of D tier, we have Luffy versus Laboon. Now, I know people might be saying this is crazy, this is not blah, 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 but in my opinion, this isn't really a fight. It's more of a moment. And I didn't want to rank it as the moment because we are ranking fights here, but I still put it in D because it's just not really a fight. It's just Luffy beating up Laboon because Laboon's being an idiot. So yeah, I feel like this shouldn't really count as a fight, but they have it on here, which is just why I have it here. Then we have Sanji and Jinbei versus Wadatsume. This was in Fishman Island, if I'm not mistaken. This fight, I do remember it, and I just remember it being pretty boring. Also, if I'm not mistaken, it was a pretty quick fight, too, so not really all that climactic or anything. Like, it was just not really that interesting, to be honest. And Sanji at this point in Fishman Island, I think everybody wanted to stop seeing him off the screen at this point. Nobody really likes Jinbei because he doesn't do anything, and Watatsume, yes, looks funny, but not really a good character, so who cares? But it wasn't bad. Then we have Sasuke versus Yoroi. I mean, this is, again, GOAT versus Bum. I do have it in D tier because it's a more memorable Bum. Well, I shouldn't even say that. It's just a more memorable fight because this is when Sasuke started to kind of show that aggressive edge, I feel like, which is why it makes it in D tier, but just not a great fight. Then we have Sanji versus Kurobi. This fight is just kind of forgettable. I do remember it, but this was when they were on Arlong Park. And Kurobi, I'm more blaming than Sanji for this because that dude is honestly just incredibly lame. So, yeah, fight wasn't real interesting because, at this point, I still liked Sanji, obviously. But the dude he was fighting was so incredibly boring, I just didn't even want to watch it. Then we have Luffy versus Marigold and Sander Sonia. This is the two snakes from, what's the island called? I can't remember. Who cares? But anyway, yeah, this fight was just kind of meaningless, I feel like. Like, did it have importance? Sure, I guess. But, like, did it really add anything to the story? No, not really. This fight was just not that interesting, I'm gonna be honest. The snake ladies weren't really that cool. Luffy just was confused the whole time because if he would have went beast mode, he would have fucked everybody up there. So yeah, I have to put it in D tier, just not that interesting. Then we have Choji and Choza versus the Geto Mazo, or Mazu, however you say it. I can't really remember. This is another thing that is pretty forgettable. I do remember it, but I mean, come on. We knew Choji wasn't doing shit, bro. Like, let's be honest. That's why I have it in D, because from the moment this fight starts, you're like, dude, we know how this is going to go. So, yeah, that's why it's in D. Not really anything salvageable from the fight. Next up, we have Robin versus Pell. Honestly, this is another thing that is pretty forgettable. Both memorable characters, especially from this arc, but Robin versus Pell just wasn't all that interesting, especially because, well, at least for me at this point, like, I already knew that Robin was going to be, I knew Robin wasn't really all that bad at this point, so, yeah, not really. It kind of ruined it for me because I knew it's like she wasn't going to kill Pell or anything. Pell as well was kind of the GOAT and savior at this point, so Pell wasn't going to get messed up either. It was pretty clear that this fight was going to end in a draw of sorts, and it kind of did. Plus, it was really short, so D tier. This one should come to no surprise. We have Toshiro versus Momo and Gin from Bleach. Toshiro, I'm not going to lie, I'm not a fan of. They call him 007 for a reason. 0 wins in the story, 0 importance in the story, but still top 7 in popularity polls. This fucker does nothing, including the fights. He has like one okay fight in the entire show. Every other fight he has is incredibly boring because he doesn't know how to use his power at all, and he only fights people that are his level, like captain level, but this guy's not captain level. I'll be honest. Still no idea how he ever became captain. He's weak as shit. Doesn't do anything important. Now, I heard he does get a lot stronger in Thousand Year Blood War, sure, but at this point, I mean, I'm at the end of Fake Car Town, and this guy is still a bum, so D tier. Then we have Kabuto and Deidara versus Yamato, Oniki, and Kurotsuchi. I have this one this low because although it has so many stacked names, like I know all of these characters, obviously, and at least 3 out of the 5 of them are really, really cool. It was so underwhelming and so disappointing. I mean, Kabuto and Deidara are some of my favorite characters in Naruto. Not a big fan of Yamato, but Oniki as well, just like super amazing, and is still disappointed as a fight, which is why I have it here. Like, you have all these big names and these powerful people, and the fight just wasn't that interesting. Then we have Toby versus Fu and Torun. I keep it a buck. The only reason I have it this high is because Fu is my main on Ninja Storm. This is probably an F tier fight if I'm being honest. But hey, we got to glaze and show a little bit of bias, don't we? Then we'll move on to Tenten versus Temari again. Now, Tenten isn't like a no-name. But let's be honest, Tenten at this point was a bum. So this was GOAT versus bum. It's another one of those like absolute hogwash fights where Temari is beating the brakes off of Tenten. And I like Tenten. I really like Temari. Temari is one of my favorite characters in Naruto. But let's be honest, Temari dog walked Tenten. This fight wasn't even long at all, so that's why it ends up in D tier. Then we have Team 7 versus the Demon Brothers. Although very memorable, this was kind of one of those things where it's goats versus bums. I mean, you knew that Team 7 was going to beat the shit out of the Demon Brothers. But, you know, some people would argue that's what makes it good. To me, it's like that's not really a good fight. It's a good moment in the story because it, you know, sets up a lot of stuff in terms of power-wise, but the fight itself, not really great. Next up, we're just going to get out the way. We have Choji versus Dosu and Garou versus Dosu. The reason I have it this low is because Dosu is incredibly lame. So that's why it's a D tier. I mean, this is just one-sided fights in terms of who you think is going to win and who you're going to root for. I mean, neither fight were super unpredictable. Neither were super important. Neither were super good. Yeah, and I blame Dosu for all of that. Then we have Chad versus Mosqueda. I believe this was in Hueco Mundo, if I'm not mistaken. And this fight just honestly sucked. At this point in the show, it was pretty clear to me that Chad needed to sit his ass at home and stop trying to get involved in everything because he's too weak. He at least needs to just go train or something because he keeps coming to do all this stuff. And let's be honest, he can't handle it. And this fight was probably the biggest example of that, which is why I have it in D tier, because in the grand scheme of things, it seems pointless whenever you have Chad struggling against this no-name bum, which means Chad is going to struggle the whole entire time he was here, which means Chad is just going to be a victim the entire time it's here. And I like Chad, and I think that is just kind of destroying a character for no reason. After that, we have Zoro versus Hyozu. Again, Fishman Island fight. None of these were really good. There's only one that was decent, and we talked about it earlier, which we will get later. Then we have Lieutenants and Yamamoto versus Mila, Rose, Sun, Apache, and Aeon. I'm going to be honest, if it wasn't for the Lieutenants and Yamamoto, the other people on here are just bums. Like, let's be honest, this is goats versus bums once again. Then we have Luffy versus Mr. 3 and Miss Golden Week. I think the best part about this was just Mr. 3 was a pretty entertaining villain, and I think surprised a lot of people on how good he actually was, because I think we all saw Mr. 3 and his abilities and Miss Golden Week and thought, man, this is gonna fucking suck. Miss Golden Week, I'm not gonna lie, did suck, but Mr. 3, he actually surprised, I feel like, a lot of people, so that's why I have it in D tier, because although not a great fight by any means, Mr. 3 surprised a lot of people, which was nice. After that, though, we have Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp versus Satori. This was like the first inkling of Haki, and this was on Skypiea. Now, this fight is pretty memorable because it was like the first guy they really fought that kind of had Haki, or at least the first big fight involving Haki. But let's be honest here, the fight wasn't that good. It wasn't that long. They weren't prepared to fight the guy. They got whooped. I mean, it just wasn't really that interesting. Plus, Satori's not really a likable character, so yeah, pretty simple. Then we have Mifune versus Hanzo. If I'm not mistaken, this is reanimated Hanzo. And I'm not going to lie, both these characters I just really don't like, which is why it's in D tier. And the fight is pretty short, if I'm not mistaken. Then we have Kira versus Abirama Redder, which this takes place in fake Karakura Town as well. Now, this gave Kira a lot of aura, I'm not going to lie. It made him a lot cooler. However, he kind of fucked him, and this was another case of goat versus bum. So, yeah. Then we have Toshiro versus Sha Long. Again, do I need to bring up the 007 nickname? This should be pretty self-explanatory. Toshiro does nothing this entire time, flexes his Bankai, still does nothing, still loses. Again, pretty pointless fight. Having Toshiro here just meant nothing. Then we move on to Sanji versus Oven. Again, didn't really like Sanji at this time. I actually hate Oven. Oven, to me, is a pretty bad character. Don't really like him at all. His power is boring and lame, and he is very boring and lame. So just two characters I really didn't like. Of course, I wouldn't like them clashing. Then we have Stussy versus Lucci and Kaku. At this point, CP0 is a bunch of bums. Stussy, I don't want to say is included, because Stussy, let's be honest, is a lot cooler, because at least she has ulterior motives. But the rest of CP0 is a bunch of bums and a bunch of frauds, so I didn't really care to see a bunch of bums and frauds fight amongst each other, so D tier. Not a really hype fight, and then the fight itself wasn't that good. Then we have Naruto and Sakura versus Kakashi. This is like their retest, but it was just missing something, which was Sasuke, so that's why it's in D. It just didn't hit the same, obviously, without Sasuke, and I get, again, that was the point, but also you gotta remember, this isn't even a real fight, so D tier I think is pretty fair. After that, we have Shanks versus Whitebeard. Again, this is one that, honestly, you could argue in F tier, because this wasn't really a fight. It was more of just kind of a aggressive meeting, I would say. So Shanks versus Whitebeard, not really a big fight, in my opinion, which is why it goes D tier. Afterwards, we have Chopper and Robin versus Hogback. Hogback I found pretty boring. Chopper was pretty boring in this arc as well. Robin is cool, don't get me wrong, but I think those just was a lot of boring forces coming together to just give a boring fight, not gonna lie. Then we have Ichigo versus Jidanbo. This is a pretty memorable fight, but this is another one that it was pretty clear Ichigo was gonna walk in and just, win. And don't get me wrong, this fight is pretty memorable, but again, it is very short. You kind of know what's gonna happen pretty quickly, and Yeah, I think the Jidanbo guy just wasn't that interesting, I guess, so we were just ready to see what was after. We're almost done here with the D tier. We have Frankie versus Buffalo and Baby 5. I hate mech stuff. I hate robotic stuff. Now, I love Frankie, don't get me wrong, but he went full Frank mode. He went super Frankie, and Buffalo is lame as shit. Baby 5 I actually do enjoy, but Buffalo's lame as shit. This fight just wasn't really that entertaining, I'm going to be honest. I don't really like super Frankie, to be honest, and Baby 5 definitely has better moments, and Buffalo sucked, so yeah, that's why it's a D tier. Then we have Luffy versus Lucci in Egghead Island. To me, this was like, again, GOAT versus Bum. I mean, Luffy spanked the fuck out of Lucci. That's why it's D tier. This is GOAT versus Bum. I get they wanted to show the increase in power or whatever, but we already know that after he beat Kaido. This was pretty pointless fight, in my opinion. Maybe they wanted to show that Lucci, you know, was still training too or whatever, but I mean, he gets fucked by Zoro, dude. So I don't really understand, you know, what the point of this fight was. I mean, he just got dominated. So GOAT versus Bum. But now into our final three in the D tier, we have Frankie versus Sasaki. Didn't like Sasaki at all. This was super Frankie again, so two things I just didn't really like going the D tier. But I will say this fight had a lot of potential to be really good, but they just never showed it at all during this arc. I mean, it was in so many episodes, and it probably had like, what, maybe max, like 5 minutes of screen time. This fight could have had some potential, and it could have been a lot better, but they just never showed them fighting at all during it, so it just kind of sucked. Second to last year, we have Gaara versus Team Shigure. Now, again, this is pretty simple. GOAT versus Bum. Yeah, don't need to stay on that one too long. And lastly, in D tier, we have Nami and Usopp versus Ulti and Page 1. I absolutely hate Ulti and Page 1, but I like Nami and Usopp, which is why this went in the top of D tier. This fight, honestly, sucked, which is why it is in D tier. I mean, the D tier fights are not good, but Nami and Usopp just having a moment in Wano saved this from being one of the worst fights in all of anime, to be honest. But now that we are done with D tier, we're moving into C tier. So this is like kind of mid fights, right? Like they are, yeah, I would say C is pretty much our mid tier. I know B should technically be mid, but the way I did this, the C tier is probably our mid tier. And to start off our C tier, it is kind of weird because we have Sai versus Lao G. And this fight is very weird because the reason I put it in C is because I like Sai. Sai is really cool. The fight was not that good, pretty boring. But Lao G, not very likable. However, really funny name, so it was kind of funny. It had some good moments. It had a good character. It had a bad character. It was just like kind of mid. Like it was just good and bad mixing together, so I feel like mid is pretty fair. After that, though, we have Shino versus Zaku. I mean, this is, again, another pretty recognizable bum. And Shino, at this point, was not really all too strong, so it actually showed, like, some of the capabilities Shino had, and it was a good opener to see, like, what Shino could really do, which is why I do have it in C tier, but it is Shino versus Zaku. It's not all that great, so let's just be honest here. Next up, though, we have Ichigo versus Sora's Hollow. I'm gonna keep it a buck. I don't like the hollows, at least like the ones like this, like kind of the mindless ones. Pretty boring if you ask me. So yeah, not a big fan of this fight because those hollows, the things with no personality, are just really boring. Afterwards, though, we have Luffy versus Blackbeard in Impel Down. And this fight just felt kind of stupid to me, I feel like it had two powerhouses obviously going up against each other, but then they didn't really go up against each other, and they ended up almost helping each other out in a way, and then they ended up hurting each other in a way. I don't know, this fight is just very weird, and obviously this is just a teaser of what we're going to get later in the future, which honestly I don't really want to see Luffy versus Blackbeard again, I will be honest, but you know, obviously it's going to come to that at one point in One Piece. So, yeah, that's why I have it in C tier. It's just pretty mid. And we have Kabuto and Team 7 versus Team Oboro. This kind of planted a lot of the seeds and how Naruto was going to go in the whole Sasuke retrieval stuff and all that. So it kind of implanted those seeds. Like at this point, this was kind of the moment when you start to realize that things were getting a little iffy. So obviously a very important point in the story. Also, the fight versus Team Oboro was actually pretty interesting, gonna be honest. But again, it's Team Oboro, so there's a reason why it is going to be in C tier, because dude's just not that cool. Next up, we have like a pure definition of mid. We got Luffy versus Urashima in Wano. This is the fight that they pull up when they talk about how bad the pacing in One Piece is, because this fight is one of the worst paced fights in anything. It's horrible. The pacing in this fight is terrible, and the fight isn't even good. It's not good at all. Urashima is a bum. It's GOAT versus bum. However, it was just kind of cool to see other people get involved, where I feel like a lot of the times in One Piece, it's more Luffy just going after the main guy the whole time and then getting distracted. But this time it felt like Luffy had another mission, which was cool. You know, it's like he went on a little side quest, which I enjoyed. But yeah, dude was super boring and one of the worst pace fights ever. Next up, we have a fight that could have been really cool. It's Renji versus, I don't even want to say that guy's name, Yoforge Grants. Oh my god, is he related to the pink-haired guy? He is. I should just put this in F tier just because he's related. But I actually liked Renji in this fight. And I think that's why it's in C tier, because I think Renji was very likable in this fight. And there were good moments from Renji in this fight. However, it's a Renji fight, so you know how it goes already. And you know the other guy is lame as hell, so it's pretty mid. I mean, Renji gave it his best, though. This is probably one of the best Renji fights, if we're being honest. Afterwards, we have Ikkaku and Kamamura versus Pao. This was in Fate Karakura, if I am not mistaken. Just not a big fan of Pao. I love Ikkaku, and even Kamamura is pretty cool, but I do really like Ikkaku a lot. So that's why it is in C tier, because I think Ikkaku did carry this fight. Pao, to me, was just incredibly boring. Not a big fan of him at all. Then we have Zoro versus Hachan. I mean, this was, again, Goat versus Bum, but two likable characters. Like, Hachan's a likable bum, so it was Goat versus likable bum at least, which is why it goes into mid. Afterwards, we have Ichigo and Kon versus Hollow. This was mainly because Kon is funny, and again, this is Goats versus Bums, and it's Hollows, which I don't really like, but I'm going mid-tier because it had Kon in it, so it was pretty cool. Afterwards, we have Sai, Kankuro, and Omoi versus Shin, Deidara, and Sasori. Once again, massive names, and I think the only person that walked out of this fight really seeming cool, even though, like, all 6 of these people I actually do really enjoy, Omoi was really the only one that walked out of it really feeling any significance. So that's why it's in C, because for the names that is in that fight should have been way better. Then we have a pretty biased fight here. I think a lot of people might have this higher, but my bias is going to start to show pretty heavily here. I think everything I've said so far, obviously there is bias, but I feel like, you know, it's at least understandable. This one I think a lot of people, you know, you might not agree with, and that is Tobirama versus Izuna, which is Madara's brother, if I'm not mistaken. In my opinion, Tobirama is one of the worst characters in all of Naruto, because honestly, most of the issues in Naruto can be traced back to Tobirama being a racist piece of shit. That is pretty much the reason, like, so much bad stuff has happened in the Naruto universe is because of Tobirama. He is genuinely an evil piece of shit, and it all started here. He is the reason that the Leaf Village broke up at all. He's the reason why clans started being separate from other clans. He is the reason why he was able to become a corrupt Hokage, because he was able to defeat Izuna, and then they didn't want Madara to do it because Tobirama showed he was strong, and Tobirama was like, oh, these guys are bad for no reason. So he was basically being a racist piece of shit. It put him into power, and it kind of ruined the rest of the Naruto universe. Imagine if somebody like Madara was on the good guy's side, which he was, by the way, until Tobirama went and did this. Imagine. They would have been fine. The most peaceful village in the world. But no, Tobirama wanted to go mess it up because he's a racist bum. But let's move on to Zunisha versus Jack. Again, this isn't really a fight. I mean, you're just beating up at a helpless elephant. Yeah, Jack, I mean, you just kind of suck, dude. So, yeah. And we have Rukia, Chad, and Ichigo versus Shrieker. This was pretty good because you saw kind of the main 3 fighters of the main cast get to work together against a Hollow. But again, it's a Hollow, so not really that cool. But yeah, it was cool to see them work together. Then we have Ace versus Blackbeard. I think this fight has so many issues, and it signifies a lot of the big issues with One Piece. Not only does the fight itself have bad pacing in terms of where it's placed in the story, but this fight makes no sense, and this has probably the most plot holes out of any point in all of One Piece, and a lot of complaints that people have about the general One Piece, a lot of it is shown in Ace versus Blackbeard. This fight makes no sense. How did Ace... I understand Ace losing, but how did Ace forget he had all 3 forms of Haki? Didn't use a single one. Oh, Ace is cocky, this, that, or whatever. Blackbeard gave him a warning shot. After the warning shot, he should have been like, and you saw the look on his face, I mean, he should have been like, oh shit, I gotta lock in. But he didn't lock in. Now, I know people are gonna be like, oh, well, he didn't think of Haki yet, this, and that. I don't care, dude. That it's still a plot hole. Like, it still is. Like, Ace versus Blackbeard is a fight that will never make sense in One Piece. It makes no sense. And yeah, I doubt it'll ever make sense. Like, unless if they go back and be like, oh, Ace has been using Haki knots the whole time, and he didn't have any versus Blackbeard. And then it'll make it even worse. So, yeah, mid-tier fight, because 2 great characters, or 2 good characters, I should say. Neither of them are great, let's be honest. And the fight makes no sense. Then we have Luffy versus Kuro. Pretty memorable fight, kind of cool, but this is another one where I feel like Luffy kind of just took the shine here. It would have been nice to see Usopp do it. However, Luffy doing it didn't really hurt the fight, in my opinion. It's just I would have rather seen Usopp, but the reason it's in C tier is because it's Kuro, and Kuro's pretty boring. Afterwards, though, we have Frankie versus Fukuro. Dude, this guy was so fucking annoying. The cheepy 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 or whatever the fuck he says. And I'll be honest, I love Frankie, but he's not really the fighter. He's got one really good fight, and other than that, it's kind of like he's just a fun personality. So this fight in general is just pretty mid. We've had a lot of One Piece in a row here. It's not going to stop. We have Sanji versus Judge. And this, again, don't really like Sanji. I really don't like Judge either. So two characters I really don't like going at it. Yeah, it's going to be mid. I mean, it could have been a lot worse, though. So that's why it's C tier. Afterwards, we have a fight that, like, honestly, I thought about moving up into B tier. But we have Ino versus Sakura. I think this fight gets hated on. These are two characters that get hated on for sure. And I will say, with my first watch of Naruto, I really didn't like either of these two characters. But after rewatching it a couple times, I actually grew to appreciate both these characters and this fight. I thought this fight was really good at showing what Ino and Sakura were really made out of. However, it still is Ino versus Sakura at the end of the day. Then we have Kiba versus Sakon and Yukon, and man, this is a rough one to say because it's GOAT versus Bum, but Kiba's not the GOAT in this scenario. Let's be honest, Kiba gets dog-walked, no pun intended, unfortunately, by Sakon and Yukon, and I don't like Sakon and Yukon, so it was like, I don't know. Also, I'm not gonna lie, Kiba's fighting style is just pretty lame, and Sakon and Yukon are really lame. The fight itself was pretty good, I will be honest, but you just have two really lame characters, and, you know, even the cooler of the two, one being Kiba, is losing to the lame one. Like, I don't know, man. It's just honestly sucks because of who was fighting, but the fight itself was cool. Then we have Ikkaku versus Edred. Again, Ikkaku kind of carries here, which is why it goes into C tier. The other dude is just incredibly lame. And Ikkaku carries in the fighting-wise as well. Like, he's just way cooler of a fighter. Then we have Luffy, Bon Clay, and Buggy versus the Minotaur. This is just a funny fight. I mean, it's funny, but it's not really great, so go C. Then we're halfway through our C tier here, but next up we have Sasuke versus the Sound 4. Obviously a super instrumental part of Naruto that starts the Sasuke retrieval arc. However, Sasuke versus the Sound 4, it's a little misleading because the fight isn't really that long. It's not really like that, and he pretty much gives up pretty quickly. So Sasuke versus the Sound 4, I wouldn't really call it Sasuke versus the Sound 4. I'd call it Sasuke willingly goes with the Sound 4. But yeah, it's still decent. Then we have Hidan and Kakuzu versus Yugito. I'm not gonna lie, not only was this incredibly short, I mean, this was literally a couple minutes in one episode, but Yugito is really, really boring. So yeah, it was definitely carried by Hidan and Kakuzu, but again, it was kind of goats versus Bum. And finally, we get back to a point I made earlier. We have Chad versus Noitra? I thought his name was Noritora, or I can't remember. Sorry, the dude from Hueco Mundo. At this point, like I said before, Chad was struggling against that guy, and now he has to fight a real competitor, and of course, he gets fucking demolished. He gets destroyed. So yeah, this was like my point from earlier that Chad, at this point, he should pack his ass up and go home and not come back until he is strong enough to deal with Espada level threats. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if Chad will ever be able to do that, so he should stay his ass at home and just focus on school. Afterwards, you have Yorichi versus Soifon, or Soifon. I hate that. Soifon just sounds better to me. That's besides the point. Yeah, honestly, I didn't really care for either of the two characters at this point. I have grown to like Soifon a lot more. Yorichi, I'm gonna be honest, I still don't really care for. I feel like she hasn't done a whole lot of anything. I think people like her because she's hot, and I'll give it to her. She is a hot character. But, I wasn't really a big fan of either of these two characters at this point, and I kind of just wanted this fight to end. So that's why it's in C tier, because they just didn't really make it all that interesting. Then we have Team Minato versus the Stone Ninja. Now, this part is pretty good because, like, Kakashi's backstory, Obito's backstory, and all that. However, it is a whole lot better when Minato's not there because if you've watched Naruto, you know Minato's kind of the GOAT. So if Minato's involved, they're winning. And Minato was there in this one. Now, they do have the other fights on here that we will get to later. But Minato versus the Stone Ninja, let's be honest, or Team Minato, sorry, but really Minato versus the Stone Ninja. Minato is just way better, so it's kind of mid because, you know, it's the GOAT versus Bomb, so let's be honest. Then we have Ebisu and Konohamaru versus Pain, and this is another one where it's GOAT versus Bums, and just in terms of power scaling, because I like Ebisu and Konohamaru, but let's be honest, against Pain, no chance. No chance at all. So yeah, GOATs versus Bum, but cool characters. Then we have Hisagi versus Findor Callis. I believe this one is in Fake Karakura, if I'm not mistaken, the 69 god or whatever he calls himself. He doesn't even call himself that. I call him that. I don't know what I'm talking about. This fight was pretty interesting, not gonna lie. I think it's two like kind of mid-tier characters, if I'm being honest, but their fight, you know, was decent. So it was just kind of put two mid things together, and you got something decent, which is why it's gonna be in C tier. I mean, it's okay, but nothing too crazy. Afterwards, we have Straw Hats and CP0 versus Seraphine. This is more like Zoro versus the Mihawk Seraphine. I feel like everybody else didn't really do anything that crazy, that important. Also pretty boring. I find the Seraphine very lame and just not that useful. I don't really understand the point of them because they get fucked by everybody. So, yeah, they suck, C tier. Then we have Byakuya versus Zomari. This was a cool fight for Byakuya. The Zomari guy, couldn't care less of about. This is GOAT versus Bum. I used to not really like Byakuya a lot. Now, I'll be honest, I still don't really like him a lot, but I like him a lot more than I did before. The Zomari guy is pretty much a bum, and Byakuya came in clutched up, which was cool. Then we have probably another hot take for a lot of people, but I don't really get how. I feel like this shouldn't be a hot take. We have Shinsui, Ukitake, Love, and Rose versus Stark and Lily Net. Stark's got to be the most disappointing character in all of Bleach, if we're going to be honest. He's the #1 ranked Espada, and he doesn't try at all, and he loses, and even though he probably has more to him, he just gives up because he just is lazy as shit. And it's the lazy guy versus the lazy guy, which I guess like on paper could be pretty cool, but Stark actually just fucking gives up. So it sucks, you know? Like Shinsui, yes, is lazy, but Shinsui didn't give up on the fight, which is what I liked. Stark did. So, yeah, it sucked. As we chug through C tier, we have, you know, the worst moment of Naruto. However, not the worst fight. We have Obito and Team 7 versus Kaguya. As a fight, it's not really that bad. The stuff that corresponds does suck because she is nothing compared to Madara, and she took Madara's spot to just get whooped by 5 people. It kind of sucks. It was nice to see Team 7 reunite and Obito be helpful, which is why I do actually have it in C tier and not lower. But Kaguya just sucks. This is a bunch of goats versus a bum. Kaguya is a terrible villain, which is why this lands in C tier, because you had everything else that's right in the making except the final boss. Kaguya being the final boss blew it. We're moving on to our final row here now in C tier. C tier is a pretty hefty tier we have here. We have Ichigo versus Urahara. Again, this is GOAT versus Bum, and I love Ichigo, but let's be honest, he doesn't hold a candle to Urahara at this point, so yeah, it was GOAT versus Bum, pretty one-sided fight. Next up, we have Zoro versus Arlong. Not a big fan of Arlong. I am a massive fan of Zoro, and it was nice to see Zoro get a chance at a big opponent. And I will say, you know, they've been teasing this since the start. Zoro still hasn't had that big opponent, really. Yes, he fought King, but King wasn't Kaido. Yes, he got to fight Kaido, did damage to Kaido or whatever, but I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I'm tired of Luffy getting the credit for everything, especially with Gear 5 now, because with Gear 5, he should beat literally everybody he goes against. Let the other guys do something, because you are capable of doing it all. So I don't know. You know, this teased it a lot, which is why I liked it, but it was also very short and then just led to Arlong versus Luffy. Next, we have one of the only good fights from Fishman Island, which is Brook versus Zio. Now, this was really just because Brook was aura farming, and the Zio dude at least looked cool, so that was something, I guess. But, yeah, another pretty mid fight. Afterwards, we have Gonfall, Robin, Zoro, and Wiper versus Eneru. I mean, they just stood no chance. This was a GOAT versus a bunch of bums. No disrespect. I actually like all 4 of those characters a lot, but it was a GOAT versus bums. Afterwards, we have Luffy versus Caesar in the first fight. First fight just not as memorable as their last fight. Also, if I'm not mistaken, it didn't really end properly, which kind of sucked too. And yeah, just nowhere near as good as their last fight. Afterwards, we have Lawn versus Doflamingo and Fujitora. And this one kind of sucked because you had a good guy teaming up with a bad guy to take down a good guy, and it was just like, it just didn't really feel good. Now, I know this was important to setting up a lot of stuff, and Fujitora realizing that, like, hey, pirates aren't that bad, this, and that, blah, blah, blah. It led to the downfall of Dofi and all those other things, sure, but the fight itself kind of sucked to see Doflamingo and Fujitora teaming up on Law. Like, it just wasn't cool. Afterwards, we have Ichigo versus Okiura, the first fight. Again, GOAT versus Bum. We'll move on. Red Hair Pirates versus the Haguma Pirates. Decent way to open up One Piece. However, unfortunately, that bum Shanks is involved. And I'm just kidding. It's goats versus bums, let's be honest. Then we have Zoro and Tashigi versus Monet. Goat and a bum team up against a bum. I mean, you know, you see the theme for a lot of these lower ranked fights is that it's really one-sided. And yeah, that's kind of why they are this low, because one-sided fights aren't that interesting to me. And we move on to Sabo versus Jesus Burgess. I feel like this fight just could have had a lot more to it. Obviously, there was chaos involved. It was for the Devil Fruit, this, and that, which Sabo actually won, which was cool. I think the problem with this fight was more that the tournament was built up the entire time about Luffy being Lucy, even like Bartolomeo being there, Don Jinjiao, like all these other people. And then the two guys that haven't been shown for the whole fucking tournament end up duking it out for the finals, and they're the two that are really fighting for the fruit, which obviously was because of all the chaos that ensued, but it just kind of sucked that none of the actual tournament participants from the jump, or at least I know Jesus wasn't it from the jump, but just wasn't really shown, same with Sabo, but like the guys that we've been looking at from the start didn't really get to compete for it, kind of sucked. And finally, our final fight in C tier is Naruto and Sasuke versus Orochimaru. Again, this kind of set up everything. It was cool to see like the entire goal of the Chunin exams, what this was going to break out into. And this was kind of the start of Naruto being like the top tier level show, to be honest. I mean, Naruto at this point was already an amazing show. But once this started happening, once this ball started moving, it was like, wow, this is taking a turn to something we just never have expected. And now we'll move on to B tier, our biggest category so far, so I'll try to go a little bit quicker. We have Shino versus Kankuro. I'm not gonna lie, two mid-tier characters duking it out. Pretty short fight at that. But again, it was pretty cool to see how Shino could operate. That Shino was pretty underrated. Unfortunately, they did nothing with him later on, which is why it starts off B tier. Continuing with Naruto, we have Naruto, Shikamaru, and Choji versus Sai. This is kind of like two goats, a bum versus bum. No offense, Choji, but he's kind of a bum, to be honest, compared to Shikamaru and Naruto at least. And Sai sure is cool or whatever, or I'm not even a hater on Sai, but let's be honest, his fights are incredibly boring. I actually like Sai more as a personality than I do in his fights. I don't really care for his fights. I think they're pretty lame. Afterwards, we move back to the best Fishman Island fight, which was Zoro versus Hody Jones, and this is where the arc should have ended. Zoro dominated Hody. Home turf. He had advantage. Zoro had no oxygen in his lungs, and he whooped Hody Jones easily. I don't even think Zoro used all three swords. I mean, he destroyed Hody. But no, the arc had to keep going on. If it ended here, would have been perfect. They could have moved on, because I think the big point of Fishman Island was to show, and the reason why everybody was so weak, was to show that, oh, the Straw Hats have been training, and they are way stronger. Which, yeah, it would have had a bigger, an even bigger stamp. Sorry for not, getting the words out, but it would have had an even bigger stamp of that if they just ended it with Zoro, because then you would have had a lot more momentum, building up hype for Luffy, being like, oh, we still haven't seen what Luffy's learned, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And it's been like, damn, Zoro can beat the main level threat now? Like, I feel like it just made way more sense for the fight to end there, and yeah, but whatever. Then we have Raizo versus Fukuro Kuju, which I don't know what that name is. If I'm not mistaken, this is for Orochi. I'm kind of confused by that name. Maybe it's not for Orochi and I'm misremembering, but I'm pretty sure it's Raizo versus Orochi. This fight was pretty solid, mainly because Raizo is a really entertaining character. He was getting his get back, a revenge fight, you know what I'm saying, which was really cool. But yeah, it's towards the bottom of B tier because it's still a good fight, but there's just way better. Then we have Wiper versus Shura. I love Wiper, actually. Wiper's one of my favorite characters in One Piece. I hope he comes back eventually, because Wiper to me is just super entertaining. Like, he's a fun guy to root for. So Wiper versus Shura mainly is in B tier because Wiper's pretty cool. Next up, we have Luffy and Zoro versus Captain Morgan. This was the first, team up between anybody, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. The start of One Piece I watched a really long time ago. Versus Captain Morgan. And Captain Morgan was okay, I guess. But this was really just to show, this is the story getting started, which that's why I have it in B tier. To switch it up to Naruto, we have Sasuke versus Rock Lee. This was, again, GOAT versus Bum. Sasuke was kind of the bum in this situation, but it did kind of set up a lot of future stuff, which was nice between, Sasuke, Rock Lee, and Team 7. What is Rock Lee's team? Team 10? Team 11? I don't really remember. But, yeah, it was really nice to set up a bunch of future stuff between two really awesome characters. Now we'll go back to One Piece. Now, I know a lot of you are noticing that there's a lot of One Piece. One Piece is way longer than Naruto and Bleach and has a lot more fights, so yeah, there's a lot of One Piece on here. I do apologize, and it's going to be a lot of One Piece in a row at times, because there's just so much. But next we have Luffy versus Buggy. Again, this showed the real first consistent villain they were going to have in One Piece, and Buggy has grown to be an amazing villain, so that's why it lands in B tier. Honestly, wasn't really a big fan of the start of One Piece, but Buggy was really cool. And we're going to continue with One Piece here with Usopp Nami and the Usopp Pirates versus Django. Yeah, I'm not going to lie, Django is kind of the GOAT here, and they're kind of bums. But, either way, it was nice to see Usopp and Nami get involved here. And, yeah, just pretty nice fight. But now we'll switch it back to Bleach. We have Ichigo and Rukia versus Fishbone D. This is a very memorable fight. This is where Ichigo first uses the Substitute Soul Reaper powers, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it is. And yeah, so it was really nice to get that. But we'll continue it with Bleach here. We have Toshiro, Lisa, and Hiyori versus Harry Bell. Again, you got the bum. So you got 007, who's kind of a bum, versus Harry Bell. And there's even a point in this fight, which is the reason why I'm putting it in B tier, where it looks like Toshiro's going to win. It looks like, oh my god, Toshiro might actually do something. No, because he's a bum, and he's 007 for a reason. But guess what? We're back to One Piece. We have Zoro versus Lucci. I have it in B tier. Yes, it's a good fight, but all Lucci did is run from Zoro the entire time, and the one time he stood up to Zoro to fight him, Zoro done put the Spotify logo on his chest. So, yeah, B tier in my opinion, because Zoro dominated. This is GOAT versus Bomb. After, of course, we have Luffy versus Blueno, one of the more memorable fights from Enies Lobby. And again, this was kind of GOAT versus Bum, but this was showing off Gear 2 for the first time, which was really nice, so that's why it goes in B tier. Then we'll stay with One Piece again with the 3P here. We have Luffy versus Magellan first fight. The reason why I have this up here, yes, it's GOAT versus Bum, but it does show that Luffy, you know, maybe the main character, but he's not always hot shit. Like, if he gets caught by Magellan, dude, he is losing, so yeah, I think that's why I have it on here. It kind of showed that there are other powers that Luffy just can't beat. Now we're taking it back to Bleach. We have Ichigo versus Ururu. This fight was just really funny. I'm going to be honest, that's why it's up here in B tier. Just a super duper funny fight. And that's pretty much it. Afterwards, we have Naruto versus Sasuke on the hospital roof. I think this moment was just so incredible. Like, Sasuke couldn't fathom that anybody was stronger than him. And this, like, showed to him that, like, Naruto caught up. And not only caught up, he was better than Sasuke, and so this really got the rivalry started, and this really showed the brotherly love coming in between the two, so that's why it's B tier, because the fight itself was like a minute. Then we have Hayate versus Baki. I think Hayate is a pretty cool character in Naruto, and Baki, he needed somebody to come check him, so Hayate, pretty good candidate. Pretty interesting fight, honestly, considering everything else going on at the time. Like, this was actually still something to be interested in, even with all, like, the way bigger fights going on. Then we'll move on to Shippuden, which we have Gaara versus Deidara. To me, it was just a little strange, I guess, how Gaara was able to be beaten by Deidara and Sasori. Like, I feel like Gaara was just, I don't know, did he get lazy or something after becoming the Kazekage? Not really sure. Don't get me wrong, Deidara is strong. But Gaara was at the level of Sasuke, and Sasuke handled Deidara like it was nothing. So I don't know, it was a little strange to me, but other than that, it is a good fight, but it's just a little weird how things turned out. And we have a few One Piece ones back up again. We have Nami versus Khalifa. This fight is very memorable, and, you know, I wouldn't even really call it cool. It's kind of lame at times, but it's just super memorable, I think, and I think that's why I put it in B. Honestly, this is kind of a C tier fight. I think I regret putting it up here. But afterwards, we have Luffy versus Arlong, and Luffy versus Arlong was a pretty satisfying fight. It was pretty cool to see, like, Luffy actually have to deal with the ocean water, because a lot of the times he really doesn't. So this is still one of the only scenarios where he's had to worry about the ocean, which was pretty cool. So yeah, Arlong was decent as well. And then we have Law versus Treble. I mean, this is GOAT versus Bum, but you couldn't help but feel good for Law, because this was a bum that was, like, terrorizing him back in the day, you know, so it had some more oomph to it, you know what I'm saying. Then we'll move on back to Naruto with the three-way deadlock. I get this is technically a fight, but it's a deadlock at the same time, so it's not really the most climatic fight ever. It was really cool having Naruto step in for Tsunade, though. I think that was like an awesome moment and everything like that, but again, this was like, it is a three-way deadlock, you know, so it's not really like that great. We have another fight that was actually omitted from the live action, which is the reason why I actually have it this low. I normally would have it higher. Now, I know what you guys are saying. How is it lower because of the live action? Because the live action didn't do it, and honestly, after seeing it, I realized that didn't really need to happen, and it was Luffy versus Zoro on a Whiskey Peak, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's Whiskey Peak. Yeah, the fight didn't really need to happen after they did the live action, and it literally didn't happen. The fight was kind of pointless, but it was pretty cool to see, and it was a good fight, and it has the funny moment of Luffy, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, the B tier, I feel like, is pretty fair. It's a good fight. Next we have, if I'm not mistaken, the highest hollow fight I have. No, it's second highest hollow fight. We have Ichigo versus Grand Fisher. Grand Fisher was the one that they built up for so long, the one that killed his mom, if I'm not mistaken. So it's nice to see Ichigo get that revenge on him. But again, it's a hollow, so it's just not going to be much higher. Afterwards, we have Neji versus Kidomaru. I'm not gonna lie, Neji is probably one of the worst characters in Naruto. Kidomaru was probably the second worst out of the... No, I don't know. He's probably second best, honestly. Out of the Sound Ninja, there's really only one good one. But yeah, I think, honestly, it's just Neji's powers are really boring, and the way he approaches fights are pretty boring, so yeah. We're gonna stick with Naruto here and go with Minato versus A and B. I hate to do it to A and B, but this is a GOAT versus two bums. I mean, let's be honest. But A and B obviously are incredibly strong, so it was kind of just to show that, like, Minato was that guy. Like, Minato really was that guy. I mean, he was built different, bro. So I think that was really the biggest thing about this fight. And now we'll move on to what I believe is the highest hollow fight, which is Ichigo and Uryu versus Menos Grande. What? Uryu fight made it this high? Yeah, it did. But I mean, this was, like, if I'm not mistaken, the first, like, real big hollow they had to go against, and honestly, maybe the last. But this was actually the only good Uryu fight. Like, it was pretty cool. So yeah. Afterwards, we have Kankuro versus Sasori. It was nice to see the puppet masters going at it against each other. Unfortunately, Kankuro is kind of a bum, so it was GOAT versus bum. But it was still really cool to see. Back to Bleach, though, we have Chad versus Shinsui. I think a lot of the problems with Shinsui fights and or Chad fights is Shinsui a lot of times won't really try unless if he has to. And this is another situation here, which he didn't have to. So getting a half-assed performance from one guy already lowers it. And then you have Chad, who, like I said, should probably keep his ass at home because he just can't compete with anybody. So, yeah, he should probably just stay home. We're going to stick with Bleach here. We have Ichigo and Nelio versus Neutra. You know, Nelio is pretty cool. Ichigo is pretty cool, but I'm not gonna lie, they do kind of get destroyed here, which isn't really fair, because I do believe this fight does take place after the Grimmjow fight, if I'm not mistaken. It takes place after the Grimmjow fight. I could be wrong, it might be before, but I'm pretty sure it's after the Grimmjow fight. If not, I might be wrong and disregard this, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like Kenpachi just kind of showed up everybody who tried to fight this guy. And no disrespect to Ichigo. I think Ichigo's a fantastic main character. But this wasn't really close. And then we have Dori versus Bragi. It was a good fight. But I think this fight gets overrated quite a lot. I mean, it was okay. But that's pretty much it. That's how I'm just going to describe it. Okay, there's nothing too good or nothing too bad about it. Afterwards, we have Luffy versus Crocodile, the final fight. I do think Water Luffy is a massive ass pull, which is why this is only in B. The fight was still really interesting. Don't get me wrong. I really like Crocodile. Luffy's cool too. And the fight was really interesting, but Water Luffy is such an ass pull, which is why it goes into B tier. I guess Ichigo has a lot of ass pulls as well. But we'll move on to Ichigo versus Ganju. Ganju, one of my favorite characters in Bleach. And Ichigo versus Ganju was just like a real, like, bro fist-to-fist combat, you know, putting the dukes up type fight, which I really enjoy. So that's why I have it in B tier. I thought it was really good. The importance of the fight, not really that much, but, you know, it was pretty cool. Then we have Itachi versus Team Kakashi. I mean, after doing this list, the amount of times Kakashi has, like, gone against Itachi is a little bit strange, but Itachi versus Team Kakashi, obviously there's just two juggernauts going head to head, and I'll be honest, Itachi at this point was kind of stronger than Kakashi. But if I'm not mistaken, this is more Kakashi and Naruto, no, versus Itachi. I don't really, no, that's not right. No, sorry, I'm thinking of a different thing. My apologies. We will go back to Bleach now, where we have Omada, or Omada, I forgot how to say it, versus Parduoke. I don't know how to say either of those, but the dude with the purple neck thing or whatever is just super hilarious. I remember my friends telling me that this guy's fights are lame, that he's super boring, that this guy sucks, he's one of the worst characters. He is way better than the, like, fairy princess dude that we talked about earlier. I don't know. I actually really like this guy, and I liked his fights, which is why it goes into B tier. Is it anything special? No, which is why it goes into B tier, but yeah. Now we have a whole lot of One Piece in a row here. We have Nami versus Miss Doublefinger. This is just an alright fight. I really like Nami, but the fight's just alright. Mainly because Miss Doublefinger's not that cool. Then we have Supernovas versus Kizaru. This is a GOAT versus a whole bunch of bums. But most of the Supernovas are really cool and end up becoming a part of so many important theories and just straight up pieces of the story later on that I think it still goes in B tier just because it sets up a whole lot. But yeah, it's a GOAT versus bums. Then we have Zoro versus Tashigi. This is another GOAT versus Bum. However, the story behind this fight is really cool, which is why it goes into B tier. Then we have Usopp and Chopper versus Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas. Just a really fun fight. Pretty entertaining. It's nice to see Usopp get some moments as well. Then we have Straw Hats versus the Frankie family. Let's be honest, Frankie's the only real attraction in the Frankie family. So I guess it's cool to kind of see the introduction of Frankie here, but the fight with all the other family members, not that cool. Then we have Luffy versus Gecko Moria. I just think Nightmare Luffy is really stupid, not gonna lie. Not a big fan of Nightmare Luffy at all. And lastly, in our little One Piece era of rankings, we have the Straw Hats versus PX5 and PX7 Pacifistas. This is going in B tier because it did show that they had an increase in power, which was nice, but let's be honest, not that entertaining of a fight. Finally, though, we can move on into a different show, which is Bleach, where we have Ichigo's Visored training, which is very interesting, you know, him training to become a Visored, all that, but it gets interrupted, broken up so often. I feel like the training doesn't really go much or go anywhere half the time. And a lot of the characters in this arc do feel a little bit pointless, but overall, it's still pretty cool. The Ichigo's Visored training, you know, one of the better moments of Bleach for sure. Well, I hope you enjoyed the last One Piece spell, because we're back on another one. We have Ivankov, Luffy, and Mr. 3 versus Magellan. This is just really cool to see that Mr. 3 had shit like that he could do shit, you know, it was very cool. This also led to the Bon Clay moments and stuff like that. It led to them getting off of the prison, which was really nice. So that's why it lands itself in B tier. Overall, I will say, though, the fight was pretty much Mr. 3 versus Magellan, but still pretty cool. Then we have a newer fight in One Piece, which is Law versus Blackbeard. Now, the reason why I have this so low is because the fight is pretty cool, animated well, and everything like that. However, it's just like such a cliffhanger. Like, I'm not caught up on Elbaf yet, but if I'm mistaken, this hasn't even been shown in the manga yet. But we still don't know what happened to Law. So, yeah, such a cliffhanger, and this is, again, another problem many people may have, I guess, is that, like, you know, pacing-wise, when will we ever see Law versus Blackbeard again? Like, this ended so long ago, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't know about the manga for sure, but I'm pretty sure it hasn't even been shown in the manga of Law being back. So what happened? You know, this is a story or a fight that hasn't been ended yet, which is why it's B tier. It depends how this ends for me to rank it higher. We're back to Wano, though. We have Jinbei versus Who's Who. Jinbei's only somewhat good fight, and yet it's against a bum. I'm not gonna lie, Jinbei's kind of a bum, too, if we're being honest here. So, bum versus bum. It was still relatively decent, but also not even important. Like, if Who's Who didn't get beat, bro, it wouldn't have affected the story at all. Like, Jinbei just found somebody to fight, I'm not gonna lie. We're going to stay in Wano, though, with Yamato versus Kaido. I'm not going to lie. I like Yamato as a character. Her fights, though, are not really interesting to me, I'll be honest. I don't really like her Devil Fruit, as well as, like, obviously against Kaido, like, she's not doing shit. I'm just not a big fan of Yamato, I'm not going to lie. In terms of fights, I actually like her a lot as a character, but in terms of fights, I just don't find her Devil Fruit really interesting, and I don't find she's not really that useful. But now we're moving on to a great moment in One Piece, which is the Straw Hats versus Aokiji. Oh, you got some big bazongas, or whatever the fuck he says to Nami. Awesome moment, and this was when you start to learn that the government ain't one to be fucked with, and Aokiji is not the one to be fucked with. So, yeah, B tier is, I feel like, fair, because this is a GOAT versus a bunch of bums, if we're being honest, but it was very funny, great moment, and sets up a lot for the future. Moving on to our top 3 in B tier, we have the 4th Division versus former Raikage. So this is the reanimated Raikage versus the 4th Division. This was just nice because, if I'm not mistaken, this is where Naruto first got back into the war, because before, him and B were being locked up because they didn't want them to get the final tailed beast for the 10 tails or whatever. So this was like Naruto's first fight back, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty good fight, though, which is why it ends up in B tier. Then we have Luffy versus Kaido first encounter. I almost thought about putting this higher than their final encounter, but I did end up putting that one higher. The reason why I do like this one so much is because it was really the only one-on-one they've ever really had, honestly. And I know Luffy could never beat Kaido one-on-one. I mean, everybody knows Kaido is the strongest one-on-one champion in all of One Piece. But it was nice to see them one-on-one, even though Luffy did get dominated, let's be honest. And finally, to wrap up our B tier, we have Zoro versus Killer. I think the reason why I have this one in B tier, because I could totally see it being higher, is because it just kind of sucked to see two likable characters that are both good guys that just can't really control their situations go against each other. It was like fighting two. It's like watching two brothers fight. You know, obviously they're not that close, but like that's how it feels for the viewer to watch. Cause it's like, man, y'all want the same thing, but y'all are fighting each other, and it's just like, man, it really sucks. Like, you guys should be working together, this, and that. So that's why it's in B tier, because it's just unfortunate the fight had to happen, but it was still pretty cool. Now we'll move on to our by far most stacked area, which is A tier. A tier to me is the fights that are really good, the fights that you're gonna walk away from and be like, wow, that was really good. I could watch that fight again and I would enjoy it, you know? This is a fight that you would go back to watch again. It may not be the best, though, because we do still have 2 more tiers after it, but it is the best. It is a very good selection of fights. And we're going to kick it off in Bleach, which is Kenpachi versus Tosen and Komamura. And this is probably Kenpachi's worst fight, which is saying a lot. Every Kenpachi fight is genuinely like so much fun to watch. He probably has the best fights in all of Bleach, and the fact that his worst fight is an A tier, I think that says a lot. We'll move on to the Straw Hats versus Sentomaru, the Pacifistas, Kizaru, and Kuma. And obviously this is more of an important moment that showed weakness in the Straw Hats that made them escape, and really showed that like why Kuma is a GOAT, not gonna lie. But it also shows, like, not only a lot of important power things, but to me, it kind of showed that Luffy was actually a human captain, which is why I have this in A tier, because before it seemed like Luffy would do whatever. Like, it kind of looked like he'd even sacrifice his crew at points to achieve his goal or whatever, but this was the first time that Luffy was really like, alright, I'm putting the crew above everything else. Like, we've just got to get out of here, which was really nice to see. But it was kind of goats versus bums. This, though, we've got a GOAT versus a bum. Character-wise, the fight was pretty close. Not really. We have Pedro versus Tamago. Everybody loves Pedro, and his fights are awesome, and the one versus Tamago is no exception. I'm going to be honest, though, the fact that it's not higher is really because of Tamago, because Pedro is awesome, but yeah. We'll move on, though. We're back to Naruto. We have Naruto versus Tsunade. I think this was a big power twist point. This was a big power shift moment in Naruto's history, because this is when Naruto started to learn the Rasengan, because he refused to lose to Tsunade. This was that never give up mentality that Naruto has, and this really cemented him as a guy who could be future Hokage if he kept this work up. And of course, obviously, that's what happens, and this and that. So this really starts Naruto's big training arc, because before all he had was the Shadow Clone Jutsu, and let's be honest, that's all he could do. At this point, he finally learned a good attacking move, and so this was huge. And just overall, super important part of Naruto, and very good fight. We're going to stick with Naruto, though, as we move into Sasuke versus Naruto and Kakashi. Now, I will say this fight is very short, not very long. But the reason I have it in A tier is because it produces a lot of moments very quickly. Like, this has the classic moment of, like, Sasuke would never try to kill me, wouldn't he? And then he tries to kill him, and it's like, oh, shit. So, yeah, A tier has got a lot of great moments, and although it's very short, a very pleasant fight. We're going back to Bleach, though. We have Renji versus Byakuya. This was a moment where I rooted for Renji, and until Renji teamed up with Uryu and Hueco Mundo, Renji was one of my favorite characters, mainly because of this fight. I'm not a big fan of Byakuya at all, honestly, but Renji, to me, he was a very respectable guy. Unfortunately, he's just so incredibly weak that it's hard to continue to respect him. But it's going to go A tier because this fight was beautiful for Renji. Next up, we have Sanji versus Gin, or Jin, I can't remember, it's been so long, this is Baratier arc, and now, at this point, I did like Sanji. However, I actually think Gin, or Jin, is the one that shined in this scenario here. Like, his moments in this fight were honestly phenomenal. Like, I really loved them. They were really, really good. But we're moving back to Bleach here. We have Ichigo versus Renji and Byakuya. This is one, again, Ichigo and Renji at this point were two of my favorite characters. Again, didn't really care for Byakuya, but it was really nice to see Ichigo put a stand and try to stick up for Rukia, because I believe that's when this fight took place. And so it was just a nice moment to see, and it was kind of showing the character of Ichigo. Next up, though, we have Chopper versus Gedatsu. This is on Skypiea. This was a very interesting fight for Chopper. And I like the Gedatsu guy, so it was pretty fun. Then we have Luffy versus Franky. Again, very important part of One Piece. It allowed Franky to join the crew or whatever. But again, Franky's just not that good of a fighter, if I'm going to be honest. He only has one, like, top-tier fight, which we'll get to later. And then we have Sanji versus Jabura. Again, this fight was okay, but I think, you know, the main highlight was obviously Luffy versus Lucci. The other side villains weren't that great. Then, for our final in the quartet of One Piece entries again, we have Luffy versus Cracker. I think this fight was just really funny. And it introduces Tankman, if I'm not mistaken, which was pretty cool. But Cracker kind of sucked, if we're being honest. But still, A-tier fights, it introduces new forms that were pretty cool. Next up, we have the official first fight of Naruto, which is Naruto and Iruka versus Mizuki, and I'm not gonna lie, this fight was actually really entertaining. I think Naruto and Iruka versus Mizuki was great. I think Mizuki was a good, like, first episode villain, and Iruka, I mean, this planted the seeds of how great of a mentor he was to Naruto, and it showed Naruto, like, that this is what the real world is like, and he didn't back down, so I think that's why it is so good. Of course, afterwards, we have Sasuke versus Gaara in the Leafed Forest. We'll talk about the first Sasuke versus Gaara in the Chunin exams, the more extended version of the fight, which was a lot better. But Sasuke versus Gaara in the Leafed Forest, if I'm not mistaken, just didn't really last that long, and just not as good as their first encounter. But we're going into our three-peat of Naruto here. We have Kisame versus Team Guy. I've always been a big fan of Team Guy. I think it has been very great, and I've been a big fan of Kisame for a while. Jesus, sorry, I'm losing it. I've been recording for an hour and a half at this point, but Kisame, very interesting. Team Guy, very interesting as well. I think it is super duper great watching these two collide. Afterwards, we have Luffy versus Don Krieg. I mean, this is when Luffy beat the strongest man in all of One Piece. We'll move on to Robin versus Black Maria. I mean, it's like that gif of SpongeBob staring at the titties with Robin fighting Black Maria, although still great fight. Nice to see Robin get a power up as well, which was really great. Then we have Zoro versus Pika. This just like took something very unique that you would never think of and turned it into something. And it worked pretty well, which is why it's A tier. It is definitely a good fight. It definitely worked better than most people thought, but yeah, there's definitely still better in One Piece. Then we'll move on to back to Naruto. We have Naruto versus Orochimaru. This has really showed Naruto losing his shit for the real first time. This is the first time we saw that four-tail form, if I'm not mistaken. And so it was pretty cool to see, although this fight was really short. Keeping it with Naruto, we have Kakashi versus Pain. I'm not gonna lie, Kakashi kind of gets dog walked here, but it was still cool to see two giant powerhouses in the Naruto world at this point go head to head. Back to One Piece, and we're not going on a long tangent this time. We've got Sanji versus Absalom. This was just a really fun fight and a really funny fight. I think it's pretty simple to just leave it there. Then we have Straw Hats versus Oars. I mean, this is when they start Fortniting, dude. I mean, this whole arc was just funny moments. Like, that's all it was. They start Fortniting on dude, so yeah, A tier. But now we actually go back to Bleach. We have Ichigo versus Dordoni, which was the fake Espada dude or whatever at the start of Hueco Mundo. This was really cool because it kind of showed how strong the people in Hueco Mundo were, and it showed to Ichigo that he needed to level up and that he needed to start taking shit a lot more seriously, which was great. So I have an A tier actually. I think a lot of people don't remember Dordoni or would call him a bum, but I thought this fight was great. Next we move on to another aura-filled fight. We have Brook versus Big Mom. I mean, Brook just has so much more aura than Big Mom and just absolutely does what needs to be done, which is why it's so great. Now, he doesn't really win, but the aura he has is just phenomenal. Then we move on to Luffy versus Crocodile first encounter. This is Luffy without the plot armor, and he almost dies to Crocodile, which is, honestly crazy. It's something you just don't expect from One Piece, and I think that's why it's so good, because it is so unexpected. And I hope you guys like One Piece, because we've got a lot more coming up, which we have Luffy versus Wapol next. Again, just a great moment. Honestly, I think more of the Chopper stuff that happened right before just kind of showed how important this was to the people of this island. So I think that's the big thing for me, was just the importance behind this fight is definitely better than a lot of the other ones. Then we have Usopp versus Chu. I love Usopp. Usopp had a pretty good moment here, so yeah, it's pretty simple. He actually showed he could contribute in a fight. Then we have Zoro versus Ohm, which is also on Skypiea. I mean, if you want to talk about a fight just filled with aura, I mean, this fight was great. Also just super fun to watch, like the high octane action and everything like that. Ooh, great. It would be higher if it wasn't Ohm that Zoro was fighting, but still very cool. Then we have Luffy versus Caesar, the final fight. Definitely a lot more memorable. I think the problem is Caesar's not really the best fighter, which is why it doesn't go higher, but overall just still a really fun fight. Then we move on to Zoro versus Ryuma. This is going to stop our streak of One Piece, at least for a little bit. And Zoro versus Ryuma is great because it's almost like a mirror match, but not. It's like Zoro facing his legacy, if that makes sense. So it was just super cool to see that. But, I mean, Zoro, we knew was going to win. But finally, we move back to Bleach, and we have Ichigo and Renji versus Aizen. This is where Aizen stopped Ichigo's theme song, and that just had so much aura, and that was so cool. But You know, I will say it's lucky it made it into A tier considering it's a GOAT versus two bums, and you guys know how I feel about that, but it was such a great moment that it has to go A tier. Then we have Ichigo, Rukia, and Shinji versus Grimmjow. If you don't know, Grimmjow is my favorite character in Bleach, and I think he's the best villain in Bleach. So a lot of the stuff with Grimmjow was great, and I liked really seeing him here. This is when they fought in the human world, I think, because that's the only place Shinji could have been there too, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I don't really remember which one this is because I think they also have the first fight where they're... I don't know. Whatever. That's besides the point. Yeah, any Grimmjow fight's really good. Then we move on to Sabo versus Fujitora. This was Sabo sticking up for his brother Luffy, you know what I'm saying? It was him using his brother's power with Ace, and it was Fujitora kind of turning to a good side, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't think Fujitora was necessarily a bad guy, but he was turning to a bright light, which was pretty cool. To continue with One Piece, though, we have Luffy versus Smoker. I think such an iconic fight in One Piece, and I think some of the two best characters. And in my opinion, Smoker's my favorite, like, opponent for Luffy. I don't think he's, like, the best villain by any means or best antagonist, but he's, like, probably my favorite opponent Luffy has fought in terms of Luffy versus him, like, how well they work together. I just wish they'd get an actual fight in. Back to Naruto, though, which actually we have a pretty good Naruto streak here, so One Piece ain't the only one with a lot of... consistency. We have Naruto versus Kurama. This is Naruto finally taming Kurama and obtaining the CSM form, or I think that's what it is. Yeah, so it was pretty cool to see that as well. But then we have Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura versus Kakashi. This was the first time them getting the bells, them learning teamwork, the first team to pass under Kakashi's test. Like, it was great. It was just a great way to really get the team together and to really make it feel like an actual family, which was great, which I really loved. And then we have Naruto versus Kiba. Definitely Kiba's best fight. Very entertaining to see Naruto kind of actually have a hand-to-hand combat brawl, because that's like the only thing Naruto was good at this point, was just being a knucklehead, and he got to fight another knucklehead. So it was pretty cool to see that in the Chunin exams, which is why it goes A tier. Then we have Choji versus Jirobo. I mean, this made Choji seem like a beast, bro. He seemed like a beast, and then did nothing after, which, you know, a lot of people complain about, but if you don't know, Choji, Neji, and Rock Lee were all supposed to die in that arc, which is the reason why, and Kibo, were all supposed to die in that arc, which is the reason why they don't have stuff later, because he already had all of it planned, but people liked him so much that he didn't kill him, so, yeah, that's why they don't really do much later if you didn't know. But anyway, we'll move on to Shikamaru versus Tayuya, and Tayuya is my favorite member of the Sound 4. Also, this was the most fun fight out of the Sound 4, because it required, like, the most intelligence, which when you're dealing with Shikamaru, I'm sorry, you stand no chance. Then we move on to Hiruzen versus the Senju Bros and Orochimaru, obviously them being reanimated, if I'm not mistaken. It was nice to see Hiruzen stand his ground, and it was a pretty cool fight, don't get me wrong. Obviously, this was one big distraction, and it ended up leading to Hiruzen sacrificing his life, which is really unfortunate because it really didn't amount to anything, although it was just a really fun fight to watch, so... yeah, and then finally, in our Naruto streak, we have Naruto and Kakashi versus Deidara. I thought this was great, but this was kind of just a goose chase to get them away, honestly. And if I'm not mistaken, Deidara does just end up escaping because he is able to fly and they're not, right? So, yeah. But back to One Piece now. We have Zoro versus the Millions on Whiskey Peak, which is great. This was an awesome moment for Zoro, and honestly fantastic, and really good in the live action, too, just taking out a bunch of different people. It was honestly great. Just such a great moment for Zoro. Then we move on to Killer Bee versus Kisame. A very entertaining fight. Two characters that I really appreciate a lot. So seeing Killer Bee versus Kisame, it was definitely really fun to watch and a very good fight. But we're moving back to Bleach now, where we have Ganju versus Yumi Chika. Again, I told you I like this guy. I like Ganju a lot, so they put on a pretty good fight. This is two very entertaining characters that I like in Bleach, and so they put on a very entertaining fight. I mean, that's pretty simple. Back to Naruto, though, we have Sasuke versus Orochimaru. This is just a super important moment in Naruto, but this is similar to the Aizen one. This is kind of a goat versus a bum. I mean, Sasuke kind of dominated Orochimaru in this fight, I'm not going to lie, but it showed like a student passing the master, except obviously in Naruto, this isn't the end of Orochimaru, so not really in a sense as well. It's like a false sense of security for Sasuke, so it kind of like alludes to, you know, the mystery that like he's going to run into some problems that he don't really know about because, you know, he thought he was able to handle it and he didn't really handle Orochimaru, which is pretty cool. Sticking with Naruto, we have Nagato versus Hanzo. And don't get me wrong, the only good part about this was that Nagato got his revenge on Hanzo or whatever, because I don't really like Hanzo, but the fight was still entertaining because Nagato finally got his revenge. We're back to One Piece, though. We have the Red Scabbards versus Kaido, and this fight was pretty entertaining. I mean, we knew Kaido was going to win, though, but it was a good moment to see them get back up there and be like, hey, you know, this is our place, this is our turf, this is our castle, you know what I'm saying? Like, we are taking over our land back, which, you know, Luffy did it for him, but still, it's still cool to see. Sticking with One Piece, we have Usopp versus Sugar. Yes, I love Usopp, if you can't tell. He is one of the best characters, in my opinion. But this is one of the best moments in One Piece for sure, because Usopp clutches and saves the entire Straw Hat crew, and is the god of Dressrosa. I mean, come on, dude. It's like, it writes itself, man. It's awesome. But now we'll move back to Bleach, where we have Ichigo versus Ikkaku. I told you, I love Ikkaku, and I love Ichigo. So, obviously, those two going up against each other was great. The only thing I wish, the fight was longer, and I want to see them rematch whenever they are both at their peaks. But to continue with Bleach, we have Isshin versus Grand Fisher. Now, Isshin I have up here because this kind of just shows the levels that there was in Bleach. Also, I do think this fight is very fun. But, yeah, it really shows the levels and the mystery and, like, the... oh, what moments, you know what I'm saying? Because, like, we didn't really know that Ichigo's dad was, like, involved like that, so it was just really cool to see all that. Now we're back to One Piece here, which we have Luffy versus Eneru. Obviously, it has the stupid Luffy, which is probably the main reason I put it up here, but still a pretty entertaining fight. But, again, this is a pretty plot armor fight. If Luffy didn't have the rubber fruit, he's losing, and anybody else is probably losing to Eneru. Like, he's pretty broken. But yeah, we'll move on back to Naruto, which we have Sasuke versus Team Yamato. This just had so much aura. It started off Shippuden for the most part. I mean, it's literally in the first episode. They tease it, and then it comes back later. Yeah, just so much aura for Sasuke in this moment is pretty great. Sticking with Naruto, though, we have Sasuke and Suigetsu versus Jugo. I actually like Suigetsu a lot, and I like Jugo, so it's pretty cool to see this fight go down. But it was pretty short. However, it's still three great characters going up against each other, so it ended up in a great fight. Back to One Piece, we have Usopp versus Perona. Obviously, I mean, you guys should know by now, I'm a Usopp fan. And Usopp against Perona was great. It was super fun. It was the best fight of Thriller Bark for sure. It was probably the most important fight again. This is another fight that Usopp probably saves the entire crew here by beating Perona. So I think that was great. And to continue with One Piece, two of my favorite characters, once again, we have Bellamy versus Bartolomeo. I like Bardo a lot more than Bellamy. I still like Bellamy, but this is kind of just showing off Bardo, and I love Bardo, which is great. So I think that's why it ranks so high, because I love Bardo so much. We are somewhat getting close to being the end of A tier here. We have Kenpachi versus Neutra, or however you say his name. And yeah, Kenpachi showed what a fight against this guy should look like. Absolutely walked him down, bro. Like, he was walking him down like it was nothing. Kenpachi doesn't have a bad fight. He just doesn't exist. And then we have the culmination of the Chunin exam arc. We have Neji versus Hinata. This is by far and away Neji's best fight and Hinata's best fight for sure. This is the sibling, or it's not sibling, I guess, technically. It'd be like family rivalry going on type thing. Like, this was destiny versus hard work. It was a great moment. And I think this is when it reveals, like, that Naruto is way more than just a cool ninja show. Like, there's so many underlying details in it, and a lot of it started here. Moving on, though, we have Chad, Orihime, Ichigo, Urahara, and Yoruichi versus Yami. I'm going to keep it a buck. I only put it up here because the Ichigo back shots. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you guys at this point. I mean, it's probably not an A-tier fight, but Ichigo does take back shots, so sure, it could go A-tier. Back to One Piece, though, we have Luffy versus Don Jinjiao and Cavendish. Introduced some characters that at first seemed pretty lame, but ended up becoming really cool. And this kind of sparked the start of my love for Dressrosa, and it being my favorite arc is that, like, they introduced so many new characters and all have their own importance and are all feel really cool and really fleshed out, which is great. And I think this was kind of the start of that. But now we're moving back to Naruto, which we have a three-peat of Naruto characters here. We have Naruto and Killer Bee versus Itachi and Nagato. This is when Naruto got to talk to Itachi again and talk about Sasuke and things like that, which was just a really awesome moment. Obviously, Naruto and Bee were winning this really easily, but it was still just cool to see Naruto talk to Itachi after all that happened. Now move on to the Taka versus the 5 Kage Selmic. This was Sasuke thinking his shoes were way, like he was not fitting the shoes that he was trying to fill here, man. I don't know what he was doing. I'll be honest, he held his own. He obviously got out of everything, but dude actually thought he could come in here and take down the 5 Kage on his own. You are not Madara, buddy. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, obviously it was a very cool moment, and it showed that Sasuke had to keep working and all that. But yeah, obviously very cool moment when you have so many of the strongest characters going up against someone. Then to end the three-peat of Naruto in a row, we have the 3rd Division versus the 7 Swordsmen. This is when they revive them in the Great Ninja War, if I'm not mistaken. And, again, some moments it's like seeing Zabuza back, I don't really think we needed that. But seeing a lot of the other 7 Swordsmen that we didn't get to see much of was really cool. So it was pretty cool seeing the 7 Swordsmen, which is why it's an A tier. And don't get me wrong, even though Zabuza came back, and I'm not a big fan of that, it was still nice to see him again. Let's be honest, it was still really cool. Back to Bleach, though, we have Ichigo versus Renji. I told you I used to like Renji and Ichigo were my favorites for a long time, and this fight was also another reason. I really liked Renji, and I thought Ichigo versus Renji was great, and again, yeah, just a super awesome fight. Now we are back to One Piece. We have Sanji versus Queen, which I know people may be surprised because at this point I still didn't like Sanji, but I mean, I would just literally be lying and hating if I said that the Sanji versus Queen fight wasn't good. Was it as good as the other fights in Wano that we'll get to later? No, it wasn't. So there's the hating part of it because I don't like Sanji, right? But it was still a phenomenal fight, and I just will not lie about that. One more One Piece here. We have Law versus Hawkins. I thought, again, super entertaining fight. I used to like Hawkins a lot until I found out he betrayed my goat. So not really happy about that, but seeing Law versus Hawkins was pretty cool. Honestly, a very entertaining fight. But now we're back to another three-peat of Naruto. We have Taka versus Killer Bee. I mean, this is a goat versus 3 bums if we're keeping it a buck, but it's such a legendary fight and legendary moment. It's got to go top of A tier. I mean, I'm sorry. It is a goat versus bum situation, but I can't help it, bro. Killer Bee was rapping on him, freestyling, flexing. Sasuke thought he was hot shit, and Killer Bee was whooping him. Like, all Sasuke did was take a tentacle, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it was bad. But yeah, we'll move on to Guy versus Kisame. This was amazing, seeing Guy versus Kisame. Again, 2 of my favorite characters going up against each other. I mean, I have a lot of favorites in Naruto, but yeah, 2 of my favorite characters going up against each other. Just a really cool moment. And honestly, amazing fight. Then to wrap up the trifecta here, we have Darui and Team 10 versus Kinkaku and Ginkaku. Kinkaku and Ginkaku were okay, but I think seeing Darui shine here was what was awesome, because we got yet another really awesome character in the mix here. So seeing Darui get to do a lot of really cool shit was really cool. So yeah, pretty simple. But we're actually almost done with A tier here, but we have Luffy, Kid, and Law versus the Marines. I mean, this was just showing the big 3 getting together for the first time, which is why it goes so high. 3 of my favorite characters in the show, and 2 definitely in my top 10, maybe even top 5, being Kid and Law. Kid being my favorite, obviously I have a Kid tattoo. So it was really nice to see the 3 goats come together, so yeah, sick. Then we'll move on to Bleach, which we have Rukia versus Ero Nero. Honestly, Rukia's best fight by far in the original Bleach. Like, it's not even close. It is absolutely the best Rukia fight there is, and it was great. So, yeah, really, really good part for Rukia. Then we have Luffy versus Bellamy. Again, I really like Bellamy, and this to me showed Luffy's kind of care for others as well. Like, he didn't have to help these people, but he did, which was really great. And yeah, I like Bellamy too, so yeah, just a pretty good fight. Then we have Zoro versus Kaku. This fight was really good, and a lot of the Zoro shit was really good too, him having 6 arms included and all. The problem with this fight, and the only reason it can't go into our next tier, is because it's against Kaku. Like, I'm sorry, but Kaku's been a bum since day 1, dude. And I'm sorry it's for Zoro, because it, makes him seem worse, but Kaku is just a bum. He is. But we're going to continue with One Piece here, which we have Smoker and Law versus Vergo. Oh my god, super fun fight to watch. Especially seeing Smoker and Law team up was great. Like, that was super fun to watch as well. And seeing a full body hockey user was amazing. So honestly, just really cool. Something you just didn't really expect. Now we move on to our last One Piece fight in A tier, which is Robin, Rebecca, and Kyros versus Diamante. I mean, there was just the emotion behind this one. I mean, let's be honest. Kyros himself was just... Man, he was putting the whole country on his back, and I have so much respect for that dude. This is another pinnacle moment in Dressrosa where I'm like, man, this guy is just freaking awesome, man. So, yeah, that's why I land so high in A tier. Then we have Obito and Kakashi versus the Stone Ninja. See, this is when they didn't have Minato, and this is when shit gets real, bro, because this leads up to, obviously, Obito dying and stuff like that, and Kakashi finally, like, understanding what a friend is and stuff like that, and, yeah, so many just great moments in this fight. It is honestly generational, and it is great, but hey, there's just better. And we'll move on to one right now, which is Naruto, Rock Lee, and Gaara versus Kimimaro, the Drunken Fist. Dude, Rock Lee has some of the greatest moments in anime history, and this is no exception. Every Rock Lee fight is genuinely phenomenal, and again, no exception here. Now we move on to our final fight in A tier, which is the Leaf Jonin versus Itachi and Kisame. Now, again, you can argue this is goats versus bums. Now, however, Kakashi, he had shit locked down, I feel. He had it kind of under control. This is when Kurenai tried to put Itachi, the literal best Genjutsu user of all time, in a Genjutsu. Don't know what her thought process was there, but that's besides the point. I think this was really cool because it showed the Akatsuki were a real threat. Like, from day one, from the jump, as soon as the Akatsuki showed up, real threat. They were a real threat, and they were going to be coming soon. But that's going to wrap up A tier. Now we move on to S tier. And to start off S tier, we have Zoro versus Daz Bones. This is one of my favorite fights in One Piece because, hey, that boy Zoro can cut metal now. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, the Zoro can cut this now. Like, he can cut everything, bro. So the fact he could cut Daz Bones down, a man made of metal, it showed that Zoro's potential is limitless. But we'll move on to Naruto here. We have Rock Lee, Sakura, Team 10, and Sasuke versus the Sound Genin. This is when Sasuke broke that dude's arm. Sakura then cut off her hair and everything. I mean, this was the lock-in moment of the Chunin exams. And although it's against the Sound Genin, which, let's be honest, nobody gave a shit about, it still showed a lot of great moments from all of these people, which is why it is in S tier. It is such a phenomenal moment. And yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people agree it's one of the best moments of Naruto, which is why it lands in S tier. Next up, another Naruto. We have Naruto versus Gaara. This was the two Jinchuriki going at it for the first time. This is, I have the real thing inside of me, you know what I'm saying? Good fight, but I definitely do think there is better. Like, Gaara has had better fights and Naruto has better fights. Speaking of, we have Toby versus the Itachi Pursuit team. This was, again, kind of... I mean, I don't know. It was more Toby just fucking with him than anything, but still just a really great moment and just kind of sets up so much. Like, I think that's the good thing about Naruto is everything gets set up like at the perfect time in advance. Like, you're not waiting for anything too long, but you still have that mystery value, which this is a big example of that. But I hope you like the One Piece streaks because we have Luffy versus Lucci in Enies Lobby. I'll be honest, I think this fight is great, but I do think this fight does definitely get overrated. Don't get me wrong, Luffy versus Lucci is a great fight. However, it's just not really as good as some of the other fights, if I'm being honest with you. I just am not a big fan of Lucci, I think, so I think that's why it ranks a little bit lower. But it's still S tier, so still phenomenal fight. But then we have Sanji versus Bon Clay. I mean, if you disagree, I just don't think you've seen the show. Then we have Sentomaru versus Kizaru. Honestly, a great moment. You know, I always kind of liked Sentomaru, but I definitely liked him a lot more after he decided to stand up against Kizaru, which was great. And it really showed how spineless Kizaru is and how much of a coward he is. So, yeah, pretty good fight. And then we have the entirety of the Marineford War. Just a lot of great moments, a lot of great characters in there, but there was a lot of stuff going on, so you might have missed some stuff that could have happened, things of that nature. You know, maybe didn't end the way people wanted it to, but overall, it's still an S-tier moment, an S-tier fight. I mean, there's so much going on. It was great. To end our little streak of One Piece here, we have Kuma, Bonnie, and Luffy versus Saturn. This is when Bonnie went Gear 5. Just an overall amazing moment, especially emotionally. It was just so awesome to see Bonnie get a moment like this, and it was just honestly incredible. But we'll move back to Naruto here, where we have Itachi and Sasuke versus Kabuto. It was cool to see Sasuke get to team up with his brother after everything that happened, which is definitely why it makes it to this moment. It was a good fight and everything, but the emotion behind it was phenomenal. Back to Egghead Island, we have Luffy versus Kizaru. Again, just pretty good moment. You know, a lot of emotion behind this after things that have just happened. And honestly, I think the best part of this is one of the more well-animated fights in One Piece. And I think a lot of the actual, like, hand-to-hand combat stuff that happened was just really good. Because I think story-wise, it's not as good as some of the other ones that are even below it. But I just think overall the fight just looks so great that it makes it this high. Then we have a hot take for a lot of people, because a lot of people, I do personally believe, overrate this fight a lot. We have Ichigo versus Ulquiorra. A lot of people really like this fight. I don't really get it. The fight is literally like an episode or two long, like barely any of it happens. And the whole fight is, one side is dominating, and then the other side gets an ass pull power of that being Ichigo, and then he dominates, which, you know, don't get me wrong, the fight is great. It's still S tier and everything, but then people will tell me, like, oh, the reason why is because Ulquiorra started to feel like what human emotion is, like he has a hole in his heart or whatever, and then he starts to feel something, and it's like, I just find it kind of bullshit, because to me, it more felt like those people that, you know, they get on their deathbed and then they start praying to God all of a sudden. They've never been religious a day in their life, and then the second they start dying, they start believing in God. So that was kind of like what it felt like with Ulquiorra for me, so it kind of just felt like some bullshit. Fight still, very, very good. Still an S tier fight, but I think people would have this a lot higher than me, and I honestly disagree. I don't think it's that good. It's still very good, just not that good. We're back to Naruto, though. We got Naruto and Killer Bee versus A. This was A trying to stop them, being like, hey, you can't get in the war. If they get you, we're fucked. And Naruto and Killer Bee were like, who gonna stop us? And it wasn't A. It wasn't him at all. They dominated him and got out the way, and they went to that war. So it was a very good moment for Naruto and Killer Bee. And I think my favorite part of this was that it wasn't just Naruto. You know, I've had my problems that I've talked about with One Piece being that Luffy has to fight the guy every time. But this one didn't. It was Naruto and Killer Bee. Like, I feel like Killer Bee got an awesome moment here. And that's why a lot of the Naruto fights rank higher, in my opinion, because a lot of characters get to shine. Speaking of, we have Tobi versus the 4th Hokage. Again, not involving Naruto. This was the fight that sets up, well, Naruto's whole story. The reason why Naruto has the 9 tails inside of him, this, and that. Just overall, very good fight. Very fun to watch. Has a lot of undertones to it, which are great. But we'll move on back to One Piece, where we have Luffy versus Katakuri. I think this is another fight that also gets a little overrated. Don't get me wrong. Really cool moment between the two guys. But I think if those other people weren't getting involved in the fight, this could be a lot higher. If it was just Luffy versus Kizaru, just one-on-one, or, Katakuri one-on-one. No, I get if you say that, then Luffy probably would have won a lot easier, because, honestly, I get Katakuri nerfed himself after they got involved or whatever, which is honestly the pinnacle moment of this fight to really show that, like, hey, this was about respect, which was really cool. But if those other little fuckers weren't involved, I think it probably could have went higher. We have another Bleach fight next. We have Ichigo versus Kenpachi. And, you know, one of my favorite fights in Bleach. And like I said, Kenpachi doesn't have a bad fight, bro. Like, he just doesn't. Every single Kenpachi fight is really good. So it makes sense this is an S tier. Now we're on a bit of a Naruto spell here. We have Madara versus Hashirama. Pretty much the start of the Hidden Leaf Village's history. And, you know, arguably the two strongest ninja ever, which I don't know if I'd agree with that. I think Hashirama definitely gets beat out by Sasuke and Naruto, but, you know, Madara versus Hashirama at that point, and for the longest time, was the two strongest ninja in history going at it. So, yeah, it was just a phenomenal fight and sets up a lot of important shit. Then we have Jiraiya versus Pain. I mean, wow, just what a sad moment. I mean, it was really sad to see this happen, but that's why it is so great, because the emotion behind this fight was really phenomenal, and it was just such a big moment in the Naruto series. I get a lot of people would probably have this way higher, but I honestly wasn't even the biggest fan of Jiraiya, and it still hit pretty hard, which is why it goes into S tier. We'll head back to the Chunin exams, though, where we have Sasuke versus Gaara. This was like the two big powerhouses of the original Naruto in terms of, like, you know, obviously not like the older ninja, but of the main cast. I mean, it was Sasuke versus Gaara. I mean, this was like two giants going at each other here, and it did not disappoint. The fight was genuinely phenomenal. Sasuke showing up with like half a second left to spare was great and all that. New moves from both of them, a want to win, and then unfortunately it didn't end in a clean way. If it did, it probably could have been in our top tier, but it just didn't. Overall, just a phenomenal fight. Then we have Naruto, Sasuke, and Jiraiya versus Itachi and Kisame. This was the big one. I talked about earlier in A tier, the Leaf Jonin versus the Itachi Itachi and Kisame or whatever, being like showing that the Akatsuki are really about it. But the big reason why I have this one way higher, all the way up in S tier and quite a few spots ahead of it, is because it showed it to Sasuke. And that was the important thing, that Sasuke saw his brother and he couldn't compete with him. That was the bigger moment. The fact that the Akatsuki were a threat, I mean, that's obviously huge and was super important. But the fact that Sasuke saw it firsthand and from his brother out of everybody, I mean, that really, really got the gears going for Sasuke. Now, this is example of goats versus bums, so, you know. But it's a good version, so yeah. And then we have Luffy versus Kaido, the final battle. Now, a lot of people might have this in the top tier, and I honestly disagree because, in my opinion, Gear 5 kind of sucks, but I don't think necessarily for the reasons other people have it. But to me, it's way too fucking strong, for one. Like, if he loses to anybody, like, he shouldn't struggle against a single other opponent unless somebody else has mythical bullshit like he does, because his power is just bullshit. Let's be honest. Creativity, that's dumb as fuck, dude. That's broken as hell. But that's besides the point. Even against Kaido, I just don't understand. I get the power makes him goofy or whatever, but how do you go from just dying and your friends are getting killed down there and there are people getting hurt, and this is the problem I have in Egghead because it's even worse, which I'll talk about in a second, and then how do you go from just goofing off and then fucking around, and then at that point he didn't know it was in a time limit, so not as bad. But like, let me talk about the Egghead real quick, where he watches dude die that he was sent here to protect. He watches him die, and then he's just laughing his ass off, just goofing around with Kizaru the whole time, when he should be ending it because he knows it's on a time limit. He knows he can't control it for that long, and he just saw somebody he's supposed to be protecting and care about die, and he's laughing his ass off. Like, it's stupid. I don't care if it's from the fruit. It's dumb, and that all started with the Kaido one. Now, it's not as bad with the Kaido one because he has the opportunity to learn from that, but he didn't. I don't understand it. Like, I get it makes you laughy and goofy and all that, but you just watched your homeboy die that you were sent here to protect, and then you also know that you are on a time limit against a guy who can move faster than time almost. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. It just, like, ruins a lot of Luffy's character, in my opinion. But we're going to stick with One Piece here and go with Luffy versus Doflamingo, the penultimate moment of Dressrosa, the best arc in all of One Piece. And the last fight did not disappoint. It was great. The biggest problem with this fight is the birdcage didn't make much sense. How Zoro couldn't break the birdcage, no idea. I don't know, dude. But other than that, it was still a phenomenal fight. Still S tier, but I'm not that big of a fan of Gear 4 as well, so I think that's why it's not in the top tier. Now we'll move on to, I believe, I can't say that yet, so I'm not going to spoil, but we have Ichigo versus Byakuya. Again, not a big fan of Byakuya, but this was a great fight for Ichigo. This was him showing off his Bankai for the first time, if I'm not mistaken. He was like, oh, how do you expect to compete with a Bankai or whatever? And he was like, watch this, bitch. So that was pretty cool. Very good fight. Definitely S tier. Then we have Naruto versus Neji. This is what made me start liking Naruto, because I'm going to be honest, or not the show, but like him as a character. I didn't really care for Naruto at this point. I thought all of the moments were good, but I was a big Sasuke guy, I was a big Kakashi guy, I was a big Zabuza guy. I didn't really care for Naruto, and big Rock Lee guy at this point, because this is after that. So I didn't really care for Naruto. But then once this fight happened, man, you couldn't help but love Naruto. So that's why it goes into S tier, because it revolutionized him as a character. And to stay with Naruto here, we have Naruto and Sasuke versus Haku. Again, this kind of planted the seeds of enjoying Naruto, but it helped me enjoy Sasuke a lot too. And then versus Haku, it kind of showed what Naruto was going to be about, which was great. Unfortunately, it just wasn't as good as the other fight going on at the time, but still just really good. Then we have Asuma, Shikamaru, Kotetsu, and Izumu versus Hidan and Kakuzu. I thought this fight was pretty good. Obviously, this was like kind of part one of the 4-part fight going on here, or kind of the 3-part fight, I guess you could call it, because they only have it split into 3 on here, but it was the beginning of it when they slime out Asuma or whatever. So yeah, very important moment in the story and leads to one of the greatest moments in Naruto history. We're back again with another Naruto though. We have Kakashi and Team Asuma and Naruto versus Hidan and Kakuzu. This really ends up being Naruto versus Kakuzu, Naruto and Kakashi versus Kakuzu, I should say. And it shows off Naruto's new powers and abilities and things like that, which is great. Also, I think Kakuzu is a lot stronger than Hidan, and so the fight ends up being a little bit more interesting. Now, the moment with Hidan is a lot better, which is why, obviously, it's ahead of these two, which we haven't got to yet. But, yeah, I think Kakuzu, strength-wise, provides for a more fun fight with these people. But we're back to One Piece now. We have the Supernovas versus Kaido and Big Mom. This was like all the big powerhouses coming together, and I just don't see how you could mess that up. So, yeah, pretty simple on this one. You got all the big names in the show pretty much up to this point going up at each other, like against each other. Like, it was just phenomenal. Then we have Luffy versus Usopp. I mean, like, you guys know I love Usopp, man, and This moment was great. This moment was very emotional. It showed Luffy was going to stand his ground, and it showed why Usopp was important to the crew, which I think is what was really incredible about it, which a lot of people don't like Usopp, and I just don't see how after this fight, because this just showed that Usopp was... He was for the crew, and he wanted what was best for everyone, even if it was a fucking ship. And I think that's why Usopp is important to the crew, because he is arguably the most loving guy on that ship. Next up, we're almost done with S tier. We have Killer versus Hawkins. God, it was so nice to see Hawkins go down, you know what I'm saying? And Killer to get him too, after what they did to him, after the horrible shit they did to Killer, man. It was so great to see some revenge being taken here. And yeah, that's why Lance's high was just awesome. Then we move on to the third highest Bleach fight, which I know is going to be surprising because you see there's a lot of time left on this video. I'll be honest, Bleach is probably my least favorite out of the big three, but I do still like it. But we have Ichigo versus Grimmjow, their first fight, which I thought was great. In my opinion, Grimmjow is the perfect opponent for Ichigo. He is pretty much the perfect antagonist for Ichigo. I know people love Aizen, but Aizen's just a good antagonist for the overall show. Grimmjow is the best rival for Ichigo, I feel like. Like, they are so similar yet different to where, like, every fight they have feels so great. And the first fight included, like, from that moment, I loved Grimmjow. So this fight is honestly amazing. But we'll move on to another Naruto fight here, which we have Shikamaru versus Tamari. This really showed what Shikamaru was about. And again, two of my favorite characters here going up against each other. And it was nice to see another intellectual battle. But I think the reason why it ranks so high is because it showed that Shikamaru understood more than just like academic level shit that they were taught at the ninja school. He understood how people operated. And that really was really phenomenal to see. Next up, though, we have Sasuke versus Deidara. I mean, overall, just a really, really fun fight to watch. And the artisan explosion shit, that was a meme for a very long time after it happened because it was really funny. And like I said, just very important to the story. Kind of showed that Sasuke was kind of levels ahead of Team 7 at that time because Team 7 couldn't take out Deidara, but Sasuke could. It showed the world that Sasuke was here to take over. We'll move on. But we'll move on, though, to probably a shock for a lot of people. I have Chiyo and Sakura versus Sasori. Sakura's only good fight in the entirety of Naruto. However, it really is a really good fight. And now I will say, I do think Sasori is the best part of the fight, even though I am saying Sakura and Chiyo did great. It really is a phenomenal fight. It kind of shows the creativity of what Naruto can be. And it shows that the villains aren't just bad people, which I think a lot of shows struggle to do. I think a lot of shows just have their villains just be bad guys. Sasori's not a bad guy per se. He just is a guy who does bad things, and I think that's more realistic of what a villain actually is. And this is the first time you really get to see the Akatsuki in that light, and you'll see all the Akatsuki are like that. There's maybe one member of the Akatsuki that is truly evil. The rest of them just have goals or have things that they desire, right? It's not that they are bad people. They're just people that do bad things. And so I think this was the first example of that, and it was phenomenal. We'll move on back to One Piece. We have Chopper versus Kumadori. This is the first and last time Chopper had a really good fight. Going to keep that one short and sweet. I think most people will agree. And we'll move on to another One Piece, which is Frankie's best fight. Frankie versus Senior Pink, the manliest fight in all of anime. One of the best fights in all of anime. One of the best fights in One Piece. This fight is absolutely phenomenal. I don't see how anybody could dislike this. If you dislike this fight, I don't like you. But we'll move on to the second best fight in Bleach. Yes, there's only one left, and we're still in the second highest tier, so I know a lot of people might be worried, but don't worry. And a lot of people are going to be shocked at this one, but I really loved this fight. This is one of my favorite fights in Bleach. We have Soifon, Omeda, and Hachigen versus Baragon. Sorry, I don't really remember how to say it. People hate this fight. I don't understand. This is one of my favorite fights in Bleach. I love Soifon's Bankai. I love the whole aesthetic of this fight. I love the way, like, the Bankais interact and the different powers interact and the way they work together. Like, oh, I love this fight. It is phenomenal. But yet people hate this fight. It's honestly one of my favorites. And it would be my favorite if not for another one that we have later on. But we have 3 Naruto fights to end off S tier here. So don't worry, Bleach fans. One of your fights did make the final tier. But we have Obito versus the Allied Shinobi Forces. Again, this is another thing that just kind of shows the power. And it, progresses the story quite a lot. Just overall, a lot of really good fights going on and a lot of power scaling moments that happen here. Then we have Konan versus Toby. Oh man, this one, it's kind of everything you would want. Two really great characters, really great fight moments. Intellectual fighting at that is very great as well. Very important to the story. Very good moment, emotional. Like, it's kind of everything you would want. And honestly, I'm almost convincing myself to put this into the higher tier, but I already made the list. So, yeah, but maybe it should go into that top tier. This fight was really, really good. But lastly, in S tier, we have Naruto versus Pain. People hate on this fight because of the animation. It ain't that bad. But the fight is just really good because it's basically everything that's said about Konan and Toby, so maybe I could move both of these up in the next tier, and yeah, it's pretty much the same thing, but Pain is probably a better villain, because Konan versus Toby is two villains going at it, and then you have good guy versus bad guy, Naruto versus Pain, so that's why I do have it above. But now, finally, we move on into our final tier. Now, I don't know if I want to call it double S because the tier list has as double S. Maybe we go with Z tier. We're going to have it Z tier or whatever just to switch things up, you know what I'm saying? But to start it off with, we have the Ten Tails versus the Allied Shinobi Forces. This fight, I have this high because it includes everybody. Everybody gets involved with fighting here, and it has a lot of really good fights that happen inside of it. It has a lot of emotional moments that happen inside of it. It is very important to the story. It is the pinnacle of the story. It is everything that Naruto built up to is that moment. But I have it at the bottom of our Z tier because they just are better. And speaking of one of them that is better, now this is more of a moment than a fight really, but the moment is so incredible that I put it up here. We have Zoro versus Kuma. The nothing happened thing from One Piece will go down in history. I mean, it already has. It is one of the most iconic moments in all of anime, hell, in all of TV. It is so iconic, it is so great, and it is such a phenomenal moment. I mean, it makes sense that it went up here, but the reason it's towards the bottom of our Z tier is because it's more of a moment than a fight. They do fight, but it's more of a moment. We're gonna stick with One Piece. We have Garp versus Aokiji. This is, again, two phenomenal characters going at it. One of the best animated fights, one of the best emotional fights, one of the best storytelling fights in One Piece. It has it all, which is why it lands up here. All of the fights that are up here have it all, which is why they make it this high. But next up, sorry to disappoint Bleach fans. I don't even think we're in the top 10 at this point. We are definitely not, but this is the final Bleach fight, which I have Ichigo versus Grimmjow final fight. This was the most even fight in all Bleach. It was the most, I don't want to say nerve-wracking, but unpredictable fight in all Bleach. It was the most Ichigo fight in the entirety of Bleach. Like, this is the only fight in Bleach that I feel like it was evenly 50-50 and either side could have won. And it just felt great. Like, I love those fights. And there are fights that we have later on that aren't like that. But those are some of my favorite fights, and I think that is why it is so incredible, because it felt like either side could have won at any moment in this fight, and I need more Grimmjow and Bleach, so yeah. But we'll move on to Naruto versus Sasuke. There's going to be a lot of Naruto in this tier, I'll be honest. You know, I said Swag Kage got hate for his. I'm not going to lie, I didn't watch the video, but I know he got a lot of hate because he had a shit ton of Naruto in the top 10 and top 20 or whatever. I'm going to be honest, I agree with him. I think Naruto has the best fights in that sense, but I did see some of the ones he did have up in the top 10 that I just didn't personally agree with. So, but I am kind of on his side that Naruto does have the best fights in the big three. But we have Naruto versus Sasuke Final Valley Part 2, and I have it below Part 1 because Part 1 felt a lot more emotional to me. Part 2 was more of like, we just finished the big war and like we got to get this out the way, which that was the whole thing. They even said that. It was like, all right, we got to do this. If we don't do it now, we'll never do it. You know what I'm saying? So they had to do it at that point, and it was still phenomenal. I just don't like it as much as the first one because the first one's just way more emotional. But we're going to have a lot of Naruto here, so just get prepared. We have Obito versus the Blood Mist. This was so emotional for me. One of the best moments in all of Naruto, and really made me love Obito and made him my second favorite character in all Naruto. I love Obito so much, man, and this was a big reason. Obito versus the Blood Mist, this was an incredible moment and so emotional. It was honestly phenomenal. But then we will have Naruto versus Sasuke Final Valley Part 1. Again, just way more emotional than the second one, in my opinion, which is why it makes it here. Not going to talk about it for too long because I kind of talked about it in the Part 2. So we'll move on to Shikamaru versus Hidan. One of the best moments in Naruto history. I mean, it is so good. Like, it is one of the best get-backs in anime history. It's, again, another intellectual fight. It just it's everything you could ask for in Naruto. It is genuinely phenomenal. And this is another thing and an example why I think Naruto has the best fights. Shikamaru is far from the main character. If you were to rank everybody by how close they are to being the main character, he's not even top 5. He might not even make top 10. He probably would, but might not even make top 10. And the fact that somebody like him is getting a moment like this, that just goes to show that, like, this is the reason why I think Naruto fights are better, because more people get to shine. But we'll move on to Madara versus the Tailed Beast, Naruto, Sasuke, Gaara, and Tobirama. Now, you may have noticed, if you've watched Naruto, that this is the first Madara fight we have. I do believe Madara is the greatest villain in all of anime history, and a big thing for me, and the reason why all of them are so high, is because his fights are all amazing. Him versus the Tailed Beast and everybody, the Tailed Beast were low-key fucking him up a little bit, but the fact that he was holding his own against Naruto, Sasuke, Gaara, all those other people, with no eyeballs at all, he was blind at this moment, just got revived, couldn't see a thing, and he was handling himself like, brother, this was something crazy and something like I've just never seen replicated in anime before. This is a speechless moment, and very few of those happen in Naruto, but Madara's whole existence was honestly speechless. Like, that's how good it was, and that's why I think he is the best villain of all time. Like, he is so good, it's hard to describe. There's not a single flaw in Madara's character other than the way he loses, which isn't a flaw in his character, it's more of a flaw in the writing, but whatever. We move on to Naruto and Sasuke versus Madara. Some of the few people that did somewhat damage to him, which was great. This was gonna be the pinnacle and what I thought would be the end of Naruto, and what should have been the end. You know, they had to go with Kaguya, which fucking sucked. But Naruto and Sasuke versus Madara was building up to be like the greatest fight in anime history, but no, the way it ended, obviously, with Kaguya coming in was fucking stupid. But that's why I have it this high, is that if it ended like this would probably would have been the greatest fight and one of the greatest endings in anime history, but it didn't, so then that's why it's here and not higher. Next, we have the Uchiha Clan Massacre, one of the most important moments in Naruto. I mean, this is one of the most iconic moments in Naruto. How many anime have copied that fucking moon scene that Itachi did? Now, I know Itachi was not the first to do it, but his is the most iconic, so let's keep it a buck, you know what I'm saying? Just super important moment in anime history. One of the most iconic moments ever. One of the most iconic betrayal moments ever. There are so many shows that try to copy what Itachi did because it's so good. But next we move on to the 4th Division versus Madara. This is when he first lands down there and he is just left kick, right kick, spin kick, blow up, you know, jumping over shit, dropping meteors on people. Brother, what do you do? What do you do? It's such a good fight. The fact that it takes like thousands of people to even slow him down is what's crazy to me. Like, a 1v1, nobody is touching him in a 1v1. Madara is the strongest shinobi ever, and he's stronger than the gods. He is the strongest character in Naruto history, and this cemented it, bro. Like, he was whooping everybody, and this is when he was still dead. Brother, oh god, don't even get me started. But we'll move on to Sasuke versus Itachi. Another amazing moment. Like, this was another, like, being built up since the start of Naruto, and it did not disappoint. Sasuke versus Itachi, when he touches the forehead, man, it's generational. It's generational. It's so freaking good, bro. Now we're moving on to number 11 here. We're about to be in our top 10. We have Sasuke versus Danzo, or I should say Mr. Walk 'em Down versus Danzo. Some of the most iconic moments of Naruto come from this fight. Absolutely hate Danzo, but Sasuke puts him in his place. He walks him down. The aura this man has is incredible. Just one of the best fights overall in Naruto. Now we'll move on to our top 10, which we have at number 10. We have Guy versus Madara. This is the only guy that could fuck with Madara at this point before Naruto and Sasuke got that big power buff. Madara was the only guy who could touch him, and he still didn't stand a chance, bro. Like, I don't know. All these fights against Madara are just so incredibly phenomenal. They are just so freaking good. So that being top 10, it makes perfect sense to me. But now we'll move on to number 9, which is the 3rd highest One Piece fight, which we have Zoro versus King. Zoro versus King, it is the best animated fight in One Piece. Absolutely phenomenal. Story behind it's great. Powers behind it are great. The fight itself is so good. Like, that's the best part about it, I think. It's just like the actual combat behind it is just beautiful. But we're moving on to number 8, the 2nd highest One Piece fight, and that is Kid and Law versus Big Mom. You know, my goat taking out that bitch. I hate Big Mom, so it's so satisfying for me. Again, another pretty emotional fight. Everything you could want. I mean, we talked about it. All these fights are going to have everything you could want in them, which is why they land in this tier. But we'll move on to number 7, which is the 5 Kage versus Madara. This is when Madara was still reanimated, dude, and he was beating the 5 Kage by himself. There's no one like that. Like, that's just not happening. Like, nobody else is doing that. So, yeah, pretty simply, that's pretty crazy. Then we have Zoro versus Mihawk as the best, and I think this is number 6, but the best One Piece fight. I don't think anything will be better than this. I don't even think when he finally beats him eventually, it'll be better. I mean, it could be, but this fight is what hooked me on One Piece. After I saw this, I was like, yeah, dude, it's generational. This is a generational show. This is the best fight in One Piece history. Probably always will be. It's everything you could ask for. So now we're in the top 5, and yeah, I've already said, but the whole top 5 is Naruto. So, you know, maybe my list isn't so different from Swag Kage's, but like I said, I do agree with him. I do think Naruto has the best fights out of the big 3. Honestly, probably the best fights in anime, mainly because the animators cared a lot about the choreographing of the fist and like different jutsu and stuff, which I think helps out a shit ton, which is probably why where like Bleach is a lot of, I don't want to call it flashing lights, but it's a lot of flashy moments. Same with One Piece, a lot of flashy moments or like impact frames and stuff, where Naruto has the individual frames of like the fist connecting and stuff like that, which I think goes a lot longer than the other 2 shows. But at number 5, we have Naruto B, Kakashi, and Guy versus Obito and Madara. This is the 2 best characters in Naruto, Obito and Madara, going against the strongest the Shinobi world had to offer. It was genuinely phenomenal to watch. There was still mystery behind what was going on, who was who, this, and that. They have the reveal of Obito during this and everything like that. It was great. It really was. But we'll move on to number 4, which is Kakashi versus Zabuza. Now, number 4 and 3, honestly, are pretty much the same. We have Kakashi versus Zabuza, then Team 7 versus Zabuza. Zabuza is the greatest opening villain in anime history. Now, I know technically Mizuki is the first villain, but like opening villain being like the first main one. Like Mizuki's not a main villain. He was the opening villain. He's not a main one. Zabuza was the first main villain of Naruto. He's the best first main villain of any show ever, period. I don't even know if it can be beat, because Zabuza had everything. He had the aura. He had the strength. He had the backstory. He had the feats. He had the comparisons and stuff. He had the emotion. He literally had it all. And then it looked beautiful as well. He was cool. His design is still one of the best in Naruto. There is nothing wrong with Zabuza. He is the perfect opening boss. Like, he is. And so that's why they rank number 4 and 3. Kakashi. What am I saying? Kakashi versus Zabuza and Team 7 versus Zabuza. Pretty much the same thing. But yeah, that's where they rank. But at number 2... this may come to a surprise to people. Actually, no, it won't. People love this fight. Obito versus Kakashi. Let's be honest. This fight was amazing. It was the accumulation of so many episodes. Like, the entire the entire Kakashi and Obito backstory, or everything we've learned about Kakashi throughout the entire show, led to this moment, which is great. And this is another thing where you could be like, if you just look at all the shit that Kakashi does, Kakashi could have been the main character of the story, and this could have been the end of his story. Like, that is how good the Naruto fights are and how good Naruto is, in my opinion, that, like, Kakashi has enough lore, backstory, fights, and all that to be the main character of a show. Like, and I think that's the problem that Bleach and One Piece face, which is why their fights aren't necessarily as good, is because the characters aren't treated like main characters, if that makes sense. Like, Zoro is my second favorite character, and we had a lot of Zoro fights in the top rankings, but Zoro's not treated like a main character. Kakashi treated like a main character. Sasuke treated like a main character. Madara treated like a main villain, which makes sense, but like Sasuke treated like a main character. Shikamaru got treated like a main character. Obito got treated like a main character. Like, I just don't think One Piece and Bleach do very well at that. The only other character in Bleach maybe could be Kenpachi, and then One Piece, like, I don't really think anybody, like, we still don't have Zoro's backstory, you know what I'm saying? So, like, honestly, nobody. But at number 1, if you've seen any of my videos before, then you would know, or any of my videos about anime fights, you would know that the best fight in anime history, in my opinion, not just the big 3, in anime history, is Gaara versus Rock Lee. Gaara versus Rock Lee is the greatest fight ever. Hands down, I will always believe that it is the best everything. Everything about it is the best. It's not like, oh, it has a lot of stuff that makes it the best. If you want to go with animation, I could argue it has the best animation. The choreography in Gaara versus Rock Lee is probably the best to this day. There's nothing that is as smooth as Gaara versus Rock Lee. The moments has the best moments out of any fight. The emotion, probably the most emotional fight in anime history as well. Like, it is the best everything. The best everything. It's not that, oh, it's the best at some things, or it's like really good at a lot of things. It's the best everything. There's not a flaw in Gaara versus Rock Lee. It is beautiful. It's the best fight in anime history. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. This took me a long time to record, over 2.5 hours, and a lot of editing is going to go into this, so I would really appreciate it if you guys could leave a like and subscribe, please, especially if you made it to this point in the video, because you had to be enjoying it. And if you're asleep, I'm sorry. But I hope to see you guys in a future video. Peace.